Okay, just give me a look when you're ready. Right, we are broadcasting. Are you ready to go? Okay, great. Right, good evening and welcome to members, officers, the press and public joining us for the Strategic Development Committee today. This meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, so welcome also to anybody viewing via there. To minimise travel and maintain social distancing, most officers are joining this evening's meeting via Zoom. You can see them up on the screen here if you're physically present. May I please check that those joining us via Zoom can hear me? And see some nodding heads and thumbs up, that's helpful, thank you. My name is Councillor Rachel Tripp, and I'm the chair of the Strategic Development Committee. Although it's not legally required anymore, I would like to ask everybody who's physically present to continue to wear their mask while you're not speaking, unless you're medically exempt. And once you've finished speaking, please recover your face. For members in the room, a quick reminder, when you're speaking, can you please speak clearly and loudly so that the microphones can pick up what you'll say? And when not speaking, as already advised, if you can, please keep your face covered. For those joining us via Zoom, please mute your microphone if you're not speaking. And given that we have, I think for the first time, so many people physically present today, I'd like to give you a slightly retro reminder to turn off your mobile phones or make sure that they're turned to silent. I will now ask the members of the committee and officers to introduce themselves. If I could start with the members of the committee. Hanif.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Hanif Abdul Mohit. I represent Green Street West.
Good evening, everybody. I am Councillor Carleen Lee Parkway and I represent Plaistow South.
Everyone, my name is Councillor Jen Kitchen and I represent Bolin.
Councillor James Beckles, Custom House Ward and Vice Chair of the Committee.
Hi everyone, I'm Rohit, Councillor for Kennington South.
Councillor Alan Griffiths, Kennington South.
Thank you. And could I now ask the officers to introduce themselves? And I suggest that you do so using the order on the agenda.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Jane Custance, the Director of Planning and Development.
Thank you. I'm James Bolt, Senior Development Manager.
I'm Amanda Campbell, Head of Planning Law.
And I'm Sean Scott, Principal Planner.
And I'm Harriet Beattie, Principal Planner on the Major Projects team.
Claire Newitt, Principal Planner.
I think that's all the officers, thank you. I'd like to remind members that when a vote is taken, it will be by way of physically raising your hand so that we can capture this on screen. Item 1 on the agenda is apologies. Are there any further apologies?
No, Chair, we've not had any apologies today.
Thank you. I have been in touch with Councillor Garfield, who is on his way here, but is running late. So perhaps we could note his apologies. I mean, he's probably running to the venue as we speak, so he's hoping to join us. Item 2 on the agenda is minutes from our previous meeting held on the 12th of October 2021. That's from pages 13 to 26. Do any members have any comments, queries or matters arising from those minutes? May I then ask that we approve those minutes as a true record of that meeting?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, please?
Chair, nothing beyond the email that I sent to the officer about item 7, but I was told that it's fine.
Yes, that was helpful, thank you. So Councillor Dasgupta flagged via email an opinion that he'd held about a possible previous use of the site, but was advised that that wasn't material to the application tonight and you could participate in the decision making. I think it would probably be worthwhile my declaring an interest in item 6, not a material interest, but just that Derning Hall is really intensively used by members of my ward and also used by me, and that various people I know are among those who have contributed to the planning portal. And also in my role as ward councillor, I was invited to meet with Aston Mansfield and their consulting company a couple of times, which I did, and informed the planning officers each time and told them that it was for information only and that I wasn't reaching a prior conclusion. Councillor Singh Verdi.
Just locally, in the late early 70s, the Gurdwara used to use the facility. I'm a trustee at the moment at Never Road. Mind you, it's over 30 years ago, so it shouldn't be of any conflict.
It doesn't sound to me as if that would be material, but thank you for raising it. Councillor Griffiths.
Yes, I've been there on occasion for meetings.
I'm sure.
I see it printed.
I'm sure that most of us have. I think this is part of the nature of being involved councillors, is that obviously when these applications come up close to home, we'll have interactions with it. So item 4, determining planning applications. Members are asked, as usual, to note the advice from the Head of Legal Services. Is that noted?
Noted, Chair.
Thank you. Item 5, announcements from the Chair. We've received the following requests to address the committee, and I just want to check at this point that all the people we're expecting to hear from are here, either in the room or on Zoom. So could you please identify yourselves when I call out your name? Under item 6, which is the Derning Hall Community Centre, I have Claire Hellman. Thank you. Simon Marks. Thank you. Chloe Saunter. Adam McLaren. Chris Behrman, thank you. Also virtually, Harry Wackett.
Hello, yes, I'm here.
Great, thank you. And Stephen Davis.
Yes, hello, I'm here.
Thank you. I've also received requests to speak from Kay Scoresby. Thank you. Councillor Winston Vaughan. Who I can see on the screen. And also Will Daunt. I don't think that we have Will Daunt with us. I've also had a request to speak from Jamie Radcliffe.
Present.
Thank you. And also from Erica Radoni-Drew. Thank you. Niall Mulholland. Thank you. Laura Glendinning.
Yes.
Thank you. Kate Christie. Suzanne Hu. Thomasin Hale. I can see Thomasin, thank you. And Constance Ridout. Thank you. On item 7, which is Warehouse K, we have a request to speak from the applicant, Katrina Hulse.
Yes, I'm here, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just making a note of the fact that you're on Zoom. Thank you. And on item 8, development land, John Street, we have several names, but I wonder if perhaps there is just one person for that, given that I understand you may be asking for a deferment. Is either James Collier, Francis Young, or Mazar Ali on the call?
Yes, Francis Young here.
Great, thank you. And then for item 9, which is Galleons 3B, Magellan Boulevard, we have a request from Siofra Boyd.
Yes, present.
Thank you. So the usual practice in these meetings is to allow up to 5 minutes each for supporters and objectors, but I recommend, in light of the number of requests, that we extend that time and allow 15 minutes for the supporters and the objectors for item 6. Is that agreed by committee members? Agreed. Thank you. I also recommend that the agenda be altered to allow item 8 to be considered as the first application, as I understand the applicant will be requesting a deferment. May we agree that?
Agreed.
Thank you. Can we also agree then the remainder of the order of business outlined on the agenda?
Agreed.
Thank you. Would members please note the officer update report, which should be in front of you. There are copies here and was also circulated to us today by email. Please note that the full consideration and planning assessment of matters is covered really comprehensively in the committee report. I trust that we've all, as usual, read the report, and so the officer presentation is going to be a summary of really only the key issues. So can I please call on the applicant team for item 8 to address the committee?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. I'm speaking on behalf of the London Borough of Newham's Affordable Homes Delivery Team, who are the applicants for the proposed affordable housing scheme at John Street. We would like to request that the Chair defer consideration of item 8 on the agenda until the December Planning Committee. As noted in the committee report, a site at Aragon Road in East Ham has been identified to relocate the Newham's Boys Boxing Club to, but the project team requires additional time to agree final amendments to the obligation required by Sport England in relation to both the club's relocation and funding of the required works to the building at Aragon Road. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I ask members if anybody has any objections or any questions about the request for a deferral? No. That's great, thank you. But I think I would add that we are happy to work with applicants where people need more time. But perhaps you could take away to the team that we're really keen that the delivery of any affordable homes isn't delayed.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. In which case, could I please ask members to vote to agree to the request to defer this item?
Agreed.
That is unanimous. Thank you. Councillor Garfield, who's just joined us, is not able to vote for that item, but will be able to vote on the subsequent items.
Thank you, Chair.
Many thanks to those of you who have joined us for item 8. You are very welcome to stay and see the rest of proceedings, but we will also understand if you wish to log off. Apologies, we're just pausing for a moment to sort out the display screen. It won't be a moment. Thank you. So that brings us on to item 6, which is the Derning Hall Community Centre, Earlham Grove. Could I ask the applicants first to present this application to us?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Claire Hellman, and I'm the Chief Executive of Aston Mansfield. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk to you about our ambitious plans for Derning Hall. This application will deliver much needed affordable and family homes, as well as shops along Wood Grange Road. It will provide purpose-built community spaces for children and young people in Newham. We are a local charity. I know that many of you know us and many of you know Derning Hall. And we are really proud to have been calling Newham our home since the 19th century. In essence, we help children, young people and families to realise their potential and unlock their ambition. Last year, we, like many others, flexibly and creatively reinvented ourselves in response to the huge challenge of the pandemic and its disproportionate impact. We now run the Little Manners supermarket to regularly provide free food for around 120 people every week. We created new employability and mental health programs for young people because they told us that that was what they wanted. We've increased our holiday play and family support work with some of the most vulnerable children and families in Newham. And we know that the buildings at Derning Hall have been a crucial enabler of our work in the past. And we know, of course, that Derning Hall has a long history in Forestgate. It's a place where many, many local people share good memories of coming together over many years. However, we also know that these buildings cannot support our work in the future. The buildings are in poor condition and are inaccessible. We've already been forced to close parts of the site due to prohibitive maintenance and safety costs. It is not financially sustainable for Aston Mansfield to continue to operate these buildings. So we need to make better use of Derning Hall to build a sustainable future for our vital work. This planning application is a strategic development for Aston Mansfield that makes better use of our resources, enables us to focus on what we do best. At the centre of our plans is the opportunity to provide purpose-built, flexible spaces for children and young people for escape. Youth Enterprise Space will be a flexible unit on Wood Grange Road, hosting a varied programme of entrepreneurial projects, creative exhibitions, and performances led by young people. It will be a dynamic and engaging space where young people can develop invaluable trading, business, communication skills that are so important to their future. The creative play space is a response to the very severe shortage of dedicated space for children with special educational needs and disabilities in Newham. It will be a welcoming, safe, inclusive and specifically designed place for children with SEND, enabling them to play and to develop. This application has been shaped by many, many people, including those who use our services and others in the local community. We really appreciate the ideas and feedback that we've received over the last couple of years, and we look forward to continuing these conversations. We truly understand that there are concerns about elements of the plans. We know that some people are very worried about the future availability of community space to hire. Alongside officers, we've developed strategies to make sure that people can access our new spaces and that the community and faith groups currently using Derning Hall can access a wide range of comparable spaces in Forest Gate. We are really proud to put forward these plans. They will secure Aston Mansfield's long-term future in Newham with a mixed-use building that responds to Newham's strategic allocation for the site. They will provide 78 new homes, which 35% are affordable, and 16 are family-sized homes. They will create a high-quality design, which is in keeping with the local built environment, which respects the Forest Gate conservation area, and which meets the latest sustainability standards. They will bring extensive landscaping improvements, including on-site amenity and play space, and they will re-provide community space and retail activity in Forest Gate. This new space will be welcoming and inclusive for the community. The development will enable Aston Mansfield to grow in Newham, to enable many more children and young people to fulfill their potential, and many more families to live happier lives. We'd be very glad to answer any questions after the next speaker, who's Jamie Ratcliffe. Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity to talk. As a resident of Forest Gate with 2 young children, I strongly support this application to provide much needed new homes and improved community space. My grandfather, Walter Ratcliffe, was born just up the road on 6th Avenue in 1906, and he grew up on Worcester Road. And I think it's amazing to think that when he was growing up over 100 years ago, Aston Mansfield were already well established in the local community and supporting young people. Approving this application today will give them a good chance of still doing their great work when my great-great-grandchildren are growing up. You've just heard from Aston Mansfield that the current buildings are not fit for purpose, not being used to their current capacity, and that the approval of this application will secure Aston Mansfield's long-term future in Newham. I know that there are concerns that I've heard through the process, and I'm sure you're going to hear more of soon, at the reconfiguration of the community space. But I think it has to be right that Aston Mansfield prioritise the space that they need to provide services to the people who are most in need of their charitable support. And their proposed plans offer opportunities to young people to get work experience as well as specialised play space for people with learning difficulties, something which would be unique in this area. Aston Mansfield aren't a general purpose provider of community space. And my experience from many children's parties and similar activities, there are a large number of places that do offer such space within the local area in Forest Gate and around. If we value Aston Mansfield as a local asset, which I surely do, and from the experience of councillors declaring their interests, clearly lots of people have had engagement with them, then they do need the support from the community and the council to manage the space to suit the needs of the people who benefit from their charitable support. I would not want to see them leave the area, which is a risk if these plans are blocked. We've heard about engagement that there's gone on through the pre-planning and the planning process. And personally, I'm sorry that the height and the number of homes in the application's been reduced. In my early comments, I felt that a taller building could have been supported, and appreciate that I was in a minority through that. This is an incredibly sustainable location right next to a Crossrail station. But the consultation responded to the range of views that were presented, changed, and I do support this compromise which has been arrived at. Of course, reducing the height of the building reduced the overall number of homes and also the number of affordable homes being provided. And that's a terrible shame for the families in Newham and around who are going to have to wait longer in temporary accommodation. But the fact that this application provides 27 affordable homes is a compelling reason to support it and support it to be built as soon as possible. Professionally, I worked with Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, in the Greater London Authority on the introduction of the 35% planning target for affordable homes. And I'm really pleased to see that this scheme is hitting it and that many others are hitting it across London. We heard recently that this policy of the 35% threshold has allowed the overall percentage of affordable homes secured through planning in London to double since Sadiq was first elected. Which is a great success that this is contributing to. In the London plan overall, Newham's got the second highest target for new homes. And so that means there is a clear responsibility to see them delivered through planning by the council as local planning authority. This site's been allocated for housing for a very long time. It shouldn't be delayed anymore. I hope that you can support it today, approve it, and we can see it get on and be built as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that concludes the presentations from the applicants. Next on the agenda, we have time to hear from objectors who have registered to speak. And I understand that the objectors, you have 15 minutes between you, and that you've very helpfully been in touch with each other and arranged a running order. Thank you for doing that. That makes this much easier.
Hi, I've been running the objection campaign and authored the 2 open letters. I stand by their 10 grounds of objection, which focus on the loss of community space. The officer's report justifies this loss on the argument that there are realistic proposals for provision. There are not. The applicant says that there are plenty of alternative venues for its 45 community groups. In fact, even the closest 15 venues are not feasible. Their rooms are too small, not accessible, already booked out to existing clients, too expensive, or not available to hire at all. The applicant did not deny any of this. It now suggests a relocation strategy focusing on only 2 venues, Forest Gate Community School and All Saint Anglican Church. The school has existing clients, and a group that recently relocated there said it took 3 years of repeatedly asking for a suitable slot to become available. The church ran its own public consultation for redevelopment only 3 years ago because it said its own community space was in poor condition, not fully accessible and unsafe. Similarly, with its reaccommodation strategy, only a couple of afternoon and evening slots are available, which barely make a dent in the 45 groups to be evicted. Furthermore, the spaces are too small for many of them anyway. Both SEND rooms are around 80 square metres. Contrary to the officer's report, the available youth enterprise space is not 200 square metres. The applicant specifies that only the back half of that space is available, that is 100 square metres. Appendix 1 of both open letters details the above, as well as multiple reasons why the heads of terms are too open to misinterpretation and do not adequately protect the community groups. For example, one reading is that the applicant does not start helping them relocate or be reaccommodated until after they have already been evicted. The applicant seems to want to focus on funding workshops and courses, not maintaining community space. The type of help provided by these workshops, attended by those savvy and proactive enough to know about them in the first place, that kind of short-term help is nothing like that provided by our community groups who foster and nurture lifelong passions, friendships and support networks, sometimes even redirecting people away from a life of crime and worse. Some of those groups represent hundreds, thousands of individual members, past, present, future, and their families. And I should clarify that I was not easily able to make contact with many of those groups. Those that I did will confirm to you that as of today, the applicant has still never told them directly that the new community space is not for them, or that they will now be fighting each other for the few reaccommodation strategy slots. There is every chance that those other groups have no idea that they're about to be evicted permanently. This loss of community space will hit hardest the already hardest hit, those who are less likely to afford the financial and time consequences of their activities relocating further away. It will cause social activities and self-improvement to become the preserve of the well-off in Forest Gate and make the already existing divide of opportunities into a gaping chasm. This application should not be approved as is, and more community space can be provided. But if it is, then two final points. How will the youth enterprise space be protected as a community space? It seems to be under retail class E rather than community class F, and there should be a condition to prevent any change of use happening under permitted development rights. Second, I think the report says redevelopment money will be put back into the community. If so, a clause be added to the section 106 to ensure this takes place and is able to be monitored by the council. That ends my part of the objections, and I'm going to hand over to Niall. Thank you.
My name is Niall Mulholland. I'm the elected chair of Long Life Housing Co-op. I'm speaking in a personal capacity because I haven't spoken to everybody in my housing co-op, but all those I've spoken to are deeply dismayed by the plans for Derning Hall, which, by the way, we feel there's been no proper consultation, particularly during a period of lockdown and COVID. Long Life Housing Co-op was set up in 1981. We provide unique social housing. We manage and control it by ourselves, by the membership. We have hundreds of members in 64 units of accommodation, from single people to families. The majority are in the Forest Gate area and a few in East Ham and Stratford. Our members come from all sorts of diverse backgrounds, and we are an important part of the fabric of Forest Gate. We include people with learning difficulties and disabilities. Long Life Housing Co-op general meetings and annual general meetings all take place in Derning Hall every 3 months or more regular. We find Derning Hall an excellent location and space where members can meet and discuss and debate. We also hire out rooms for creches, so all our members are able to attend if they wish. It is vital to allow us to have our democratic discussions on our processes, to agree things, for example, like agreed budgets and our rents. It also provides a space for us to have social events, for example, Christmas socials, which involves all the members in the local community and the co-op and their children. We fear deeply the redevelopment plans for Derning Hall will mean the end of our access to that iconic hall in Forest Gate. We feel that it will either mean that the space is not adequate or that there'll be a huge hike in fees. With less than 90% of Derning Hall after development being given over to so-called community space, we believe, and also at the discretion of who can use it by Aston Mansfield, without any clear public use, we fear that will mean the end of that hall being used by ourselves. Finding suitable space and affordable space in the local area will be extremely difficult. That will have a huge challenge for us as a democratically run housing co-op to democratically function, to properly run ourselves over a period of time. Therefore, I ask you to reject this planning permission, and I ask the councillors who sit on the Derning Hall Management Board involved in this also to reject these plans. If Derning Hall needs refurbishment, then that should be considered and given, and I think the council should play a role in that. We believe in long life in social housing. We provide it. We don't think that so-called affordable housing, as shown in many examples right across the borough and the country, is the real housing that people need. So therefore, I ask you to reject this planning and to ensure Derning Hall can remain for local people.
Thank you. My name's Kate Christie. I am the Group Scout leader of the 2nd Newham Scout Group that meet in Derning Hall. And I'm going to give you a bit of history. The 2nd Newham started in 1907 in Forest Gate, so we've had a very long-standing relationship with Forest Gate. Derning Hall was originally in Limehouse at the time, and the Aston Charities accounting firm was Avery, who also had a family association with the Seconds, and Avery was a leader with the group. The Scout group was started at Derning Hall in Limehouse, and the leaders from the Second went to the group in Limehouse to get it on its feet. The relationship with Aston resulted in them building an HQ for the Seconds in Forest Lane. Unfortunately, this building was destroyed in World War II. After the war, Aston moved its activities into Forest Gate and West Ham. The Seconds were still associated with them and started meeting at the shop on Woodgrange Road, while Derning Hall was being developed in Earlham Grove. The next move was into a basement in the new hostel building. Then after that, we had a move where we moved into Derning Hall on the gym floor, and Aston made alterations, especially for us, to the old dressing room balcony and to give it the Scout den as it is today. Derning Hall is our headquarters. We are not just a general user. It is our home. It is our base. Without it, we are gone. We have nowhere else to go. We need huge amount of space. We need halls to do activities, to run games, to do badge work, to develop these children into good, strong adults. We need camping equipment. We have lots of areas in there. Without it, we are lost, and Scouts are closing left, right and centre at the moment with a massive waiting list. For this to happen, we are not going to get, it's going to be detrimental to Forest Gate. Children are going to lose out. Parents are going to lose out. The skills that Scouts offer to young children of any of ages, doesn't matter where they're from, we are very welcoming. Yes, Derning Hall needs to be redeveloped because we don't have any access for disabled children, but not at the cost of our space, of our Derning Hall. We feel very, very passionate that we feel that Aston Mansfield, particularly the Aston side of things, have completely rejected 2nd Newham after the long-standing history that we have. And we'll have nowhere to go because of the space, the things we need and what we've been offered. We've been very little contact from Aston Mansfield about what is happening. We haven't been told. As Niall said, I agree with him that there's been no contact really about what's going to happen. There's not enough space, like I keep saying. We can't compete. It's very unfair for us to compete against the other members in a small space. And it's not what we want. And each group to compete is not good enough. We've had possibly, I don't know, over 100,000 people come through our doors at 2nd Newham from 1907. We want that to continue. We have waiting lists of children who want to come and join us. We can't do that if we have nowhere to meet. We're a very, very small space where we'd have to really limit numbers. It's so disappointing. Also for the East London School of Dance, they've had like 5,000 students, and Show Kids also have 75 students. They have no space to go to either. Handing over to Connie.
Hello, I'm a Forest Gate resident and my family uses Derning Hall for Show Kids and karate. I'm representing the East London School of Dance, established at Derning Hall 35 years ago for the young people of Forest Gate, and the England Shotokan Karate Do Federation. I echo the concerns made by the previous speaker. Derning Hall provides for the elderly, refugees, children, and it gives local access to clubs and groups that gives local families opportunities to thrive. The multiple large halls bring people together from different ethnic, social, and economic backgrounds and create social value through positive interaction between people on an equal footing in the community in which they live. The proposal will put a stop to this and negatively impact on inclusion, fairness, and well-being in the local community. It goes against Newham's community wealth building agenda because the existing hall is an anchor for social capital and supports social integration and cohesion. This will be lost. The proposal goes against Mayor Roxana Fiaz's COVID-19 commitment to 15-minute neighbourhoods, and it does not meet Newham's family housing target or the affordable housing target. I hand over to Thomasin Hale.
Okay, I'm Thomason Hell. I'm a local parent and foster parent. I'm sitting here with my children and other children in the local area that I care for. I use Derning Hall all the time. It is the only non-faith space that I can use to accommodate having children of different faiths within the same family. Other offers that have been proposed are all faith-based locations that I cannot access. I echo Sue's points of them being inaccessible to start with. I also have a son who has special needs, who has ADHD. The SEND space that's been provided is just too small. When taken into account with the amount of space that's needed for disabled toilets, for disabled access, and for wheelchairs, if there are physical disabilities, the space is not suitable for SEND children. It's not being protected. It's not even inclusive. It's SEND parents, and I'm in on a lot of SEND groups, would prefer spaces that can be accessed by all, that can have specialist facilities and aids there and possibly designed for them. But I would show serious concerns about the consultation process in this, the whole application, that the public have not been consulted, that much of the fact that people know about the redevelopment of Derning Hall has been through word of mouth, and because I have been publicising it to people word of mouth. And as of a few weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, there were even groups I was speaking to who did not know Derning Hall was going to be redeveloped. So I do not think that Aston Mansfield, perhaps not deliberately, perhaps because of who it's employing to do its consultations, is representing the views of people accurately and has done surveys that genuinely reflect what people's needs are. I think that the language and terminology used in the surveys has been to exclude people really being able to say what they want to do. Thirdly, I have teenage foster boys. They're 18. They do not want a space that is exclusive to them. They want a space that they can grow up into, that they can get used to. Teenagers do not like going to new places. They like what is familiar. They like to be in a space that can accommodate their needs, that has social functions. They don't want to go and sit in offices, and this social entrepreneur space feels more like an office to me. It's not protected. It's a retail space on the plan, and I don't think it's where young people want to be. There's a youth zone in Forest Gate just down the road, and there are other office spaces if an office space is needed for this space. My last point is that I would like to say that the size and what's left of Derning Hall community space is under 10%, and that's the floor area, and even then it's less than 10% if you take into space the triple or double height halls that are there. I'll hand over to Kay.
I've got a few seconds.
I think there is about 1 minute left.
Right, okay.
That's between the rest of you.
You've heard loads and loads. You know, all of you that live or know anything about Forest Gate know that Derning Hall, Aston Mansfield have always been at the heart of the community. What we heard tonight was completely against the principles of Aston Mansfield. Its uniqueness within Forest Gate is that everybody, regardless of age, regardless of race, regardless of religion, can meet there. It's an open policy where anybody can go. You've heard all the groups that will be dismissed, all the groups that will be got rid of. You all know, because you're councillors in the area, you know that there is already special education provision being provided by the ARC. You know that the youth centre and the councillor, the mayor's provision is for young people. What Derning Hall does is for all of us, and we all need that now for our mental well-being and for our community development. Thank you.
That does bring us to the end of the 15 minutes allowed for objectors. I can really only apologise to those of you who've come along and aren't able to speak. The planning processes and legislation are really clear that in order to make the process fair, an exactly equal amount of time is allocated to those for the application and also those against. I can only apologise, but our hands are really tied in this respect. So I'm sorry for how this seems, but that is the way that it is. We move on, therefore, to discussion and questions. I'd like to ask members to indicate if they do have a question, and if it's clear to you whether your question is directed. In fact, no, I'm so sorry, we haven't had the officers' report. Forgive me. Forget what I said about questions. Sean, I had not forgotten you. Could you please give us the officers' report?
Thank you, Chair. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
So item 6 is a planning application at Derning Hall Community Centre on Earlham Grove in Forest Gate. So this is a site location plan showing the location of the site here outlined in red. As you can see, it fronts onto Wood Grange Road with Earlham Grove running down the side. Here is the co-op site, and here is the Forest Gate station. And this is just a bird's eye view of the site. And here are some key site images from around the halls. So the application is for full planning permission for demolition of the existing buildings, erection of up to 10 stories accommodating 78 residential units, alongside 322 square meters of retail floor space and 413 square meters of community use floor space at ground floor. Associated car and cycle parking, associated landscaping works, new vehicular access from Earlham Grove and other associated works. This is a major planning application. The application site is located within Forest Gate Town Centre Conservation Area, adjoining Wood Grange Estate Conservation Area, and affects the setting of a Grade 2 listed sculpture called The Preacher over at the Methodist Church on the other side of Wood Grange Road. So these are some key visual imagery of the proposal. So this is the site looking north, and as you can see, there's kind of a cross section through the co-op site. And then this is the southern elevation on Earlham Grove. And here we have a northern view of the site. So this is Wood Grange Road. And then again, a view looking east on Earlham Grove. Here is the internal courtyard view. And here is another sort of more long range view looking towards Forest Gate Station here and the development here, the proposed development. This is the site layout. As you can see, the new vehicular access is here with some blue badge parking. There is the community uses here, and also the youth enterprise space, and then 4 retail units here, and the main entrance to the to building 1 here with some bin storage, and then the main entrance to building 2 is here. So the key areas for consideration in terms of the principle of development are the proposed community use, the loss of community use, the loss of hostel accommodation, proposed residential development, and commercial uses. So in terms of the principle of development, the proposed community use needs to take into consideration the local plan policy INF 8, which relates to community facilities, and this sets out the principal matters for new community uses. And this requires the following: that the proposal must deal with the whole site, and its officers view that yes, it does. The site is identified as a strategic site allocation as well. And it is also the case that the proposal is for the comprehensive redevelopment of the application site. So the location should be a town centre or community facilities opportunity area. And actually the site is within both of these designations. It should also meet local need, And yes, so the two proposed creative spaces for children with special educational needs and disabilities, it totals 176 square metres, and there's a youth pop-up enterprise space totaling 210 square metres. We've consulted LBN SEND officer, and they have confirmed that there's a need for such facilities. This is included in the committee update. It is also apparent that these facilities would serve the borough. The applicant intends to work with local schools and voluntary sector organisations from within the borough. Outside of the core hours, a community access scheme would enable facilities to be used by local groups and organisations, reinforcing the local reach of the proposed community facilities. This is something that we've negotiated over the course of the application and is included as a condition. The site should be outwardly looking, and yes, it is considered to be generally outwardly looking, with the buildings on main buildings on the periphery of the site and access via from the street. The use should be inclusive, and officers have assessed that yes, it is. The proposal seeks to serve the needs of children and young people with SEND, and it's accessible. The application documents show that it's wheelchair accessible as well, and the officers propose that, as mentioned before, a community access scheme and relocation strategy would be conditioned if minded for approval. Overall, the principal matters in regards to the proposed community use are considered to have been met. A total of, so now we need to come on to the loss of community space, and a total of 57 user groups are known to have to use or recently have used the facilities. The consultation responses indicate this is a valued space and that there are concerns about suitable alternative provision. The proposal would result in the loss of floor space with re-provision on a smaller footprint, and this is as set out in the table on your screens. So as you can see, there's 2,004 square meters going down to 387. However, having reviewed the plans and visited the site, the applicant's assertions that that there is 586 square meters of usable space is considered to, we do concur with that observation. There is a lot of space within the facility, owed to offices, corridors, and that kind of thing. So with ongoing negotiation, the applicant has secured a larger space for re-provision, and the youth pop-up zone, rather than being retail, would provide an additional 210 square meters of floor space to be secured as community floor space. This would have an ancillary retail aspect. Officers have negotiated the community access scheme as well, as mentioned, and this is to be secured by condition. It is acknowledged that the new facilities would not re-accommodate all users. Some require the large spaces that the halls currently have, and therefore there is a requirement to be secured by condition to find alternative premises. So moving on, the policy S1 of the London plans indicates that a loss would be acceptable where there are realistic proposals for re-provision that continue to serve the needs of the neighbourhood and wider community. The applicant has demonstrated that there are facilities in the locality, and this is further backed up by the requirement for a relocation strategy for this to be examined and approved in more detail under a condition. So overall, the principle of the loss of community floor space is considered to be acceptable on balance. The principle of development in regards to the loss of hostel facilities. There are 21 hostel units currently on site. They were vacated in January 2020 due to non-compliance with fire safety regulations. Officers note that there are 3 other hostels in the locality. The accommodation, having been on site, appears as though it needs full refurbishment to bring back into meaningful use. The local plan seeks to create high quality spaces and stable and mixed and balanced communities, and officers are of the view that the preference should be to provide good quality permanent homes for people to meet those aims. Overall, the principle of the loss of the hostel provision is considered to be acceptable. Regarding the commercial uses, the site has the following designations. They are Forest Gate District Centre, a town centre buffer zone, the is a primary shopping frontage along the front here on Woodgrange Road, and primary shopping area, as well as an employment hub. Of the 8 existing retail units, 6 are currently within a primary shopping frontage, and the 4 proposed retail units are all proposed under use class EA to be secured by condition. And this is for the display of retail, display or retail sale of goods other than hot food. Another unit for the youth enterprise space would contain, as mentioned, an ancillary retail aspect. The provision of primary retail as a result of the proposal would be at 71%. This supports the provision of primary retail of 70% as sought by policy. And overall, the loss and reprovision of commercial uses is considered to be acceptable. With regards to the residential use, the site is a strategic site, and it supports the reprovision of residential uses. The residential development of the site will positively contribute to the borough's housing stock, noting the demand for increased housing. The site is located within a town centre and adjacent to Forest Gate Station. And the proposed scheme comprises the 78 units here, with a mix of family homes. It is noted that the proposal fulfills the brief set by the site allocation, and in principle, the provision of new homes is considered to be acceptable in this location, and therefore the residential-led development is supported. So moving on to the affordable housing, local plan policy H1 reinforces the need, as mentioned, to secure quality mixed and balanced communities. On behalf of the council, BNP Paribas has independently assessed the viability of the scheme, which shows the scheme to be unviable, a deficit of around 13.5 million. BNPP has recommended a review mechanism, and irrespective of the findings, the applicant has made the following affordable housing offer. So it would be a 35% offer, and that's 27 units as set out on the screen, and the largest proportion of those would be allocated family housing. And then, so officers consider that the proposed offer of affordable housing is a good offer, and therefore the proposed development with respect to affordable housing is supported. And here is a mix, a table showing the mix of units in development and the affordable split. So regarding design, we've looked at the acceptability of a tall building in this location. The site is a strategic site with indicative heights of up to 8 stories towards Forest Gate train station. The design has been refined throughout the pre-application process with the design review panel and through pre-application meetings, and also pre-application meetings with the Greater London Authority. So we've we looked at 15 stories to start off with, and considered that 10 would be the most appropriate height in this location when looking at a tall building. The strategic design manager is of the view that the building will appear quite prominent in views along Woodgrange Road, but this would also be true at 8 stories, particularly from the north, due to the modest scale of the existing building. The DRP is supportive of the height and massing, noting that building 1 fronting, so this building here, fronting Woodgrange Road, has a broad face and could appear bulky and straight on views. However, as it will be predominantly seen obliquely in views along Woodgrange Road from the north and south, that's considered to be acceptable. And therefore, officers consider that the refinements made make this an appropriately scaled development. In terms of the architecture, in front of you are some key facade elements. So there's the proposal maintains a high standard of architecture by including the 3 varying facade types with varying brickwork colours and types with precast elements. So as you can see, there's types A, B, and C as shown here. Furthermore, the shop fronts along Woodgrange Road maintain a regular rhythm and have incorporated precast pilasters reflecting the Victorian character of the area. And here are some a palette of materials in terms of just the brickwork there. So a number of conditions have been recommended, as you can see on your screen, and these will help to maintain the quality of the scheme as it would if approved. Furthermore, the novation of the architect is also to be secured by a Section 106 head of term. And the proposed development with respect to design is therefore supported. In regards to heritage, the application site is located within Forest Gate Town Centre Conservation Area and is adjacent to Woodgrange Road, Woodgrange Estate Conservation Area. An area of townscape value is also located to the east. The application has also been advertised as affecting the Grade 2 listed sculpture, the Preacher. The impacts to the above, to the designated and undesignated heritage assets have been assessed in accordance with Section 66 of and 72 of the Planning Act 1990. Historic England have objected to the proposals, the pertinent points being the height and bulk and sense of enclosure at close range, and the proposal would be perceived as a bulky tower in short to medium range views. The tests set out in the NBPF have been considered due to the separation of the development from the identified listed assets and the site, as well as the limited contribution of the listed sculpture setting to its overall significance. Harm is not identified. It is considered that the proposal would preserve and enhance the character and appearance of the conservation area and have a benign impact on the significance of the listed sculpture. Therefore, the proposal is considered to be in accordance with the above identified national, regional and local policies and legislation. In conclusion, whilst there is a degree of harm, this is less than substantial and outweighed by the public benefits of the scheme in regards to its design. So the Office of Recommendation, Strategic Development Committee is asked to note the committee update and resolve to agree the reasons for approval as set out in the committee report, refer the application to the London Mayor as a stage 2 referral, and subject to the Mayor of London advising that he is content to allow the council to determine the application itself, delegate authority to the Director of Planning and Development to grant planning permission subject to the completion of a legal agreement under Section 106 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990, based on the heads of terms identified at Appendix 2 of the committee report and the conditions listed in Appendix 1. Thank you.
Thank you. So if I can try again, that brings us to the section of the committee for comments or questions from members. I can see a couple of people already. Rohit, can I bring you in, and then Jen?
Thank you very much, Chair. So I had a few questions, but I'll just pick 2 for now. So my first question, I think, is about the loss of community space. I think we've heard that it's been reduced drastically. And the applicant mentioned about relocation, but I didn't actually hear what those plans were. So that was my first question, was about the loss of community space by 10%, which is, and has the applicant taken into consideration about reduction of units, shopping units and others to kind of make up for that? Again, whether those kind of things were taken into consideration to mitigate the fact that there is such a huge loss of community space. The second question was more about the provision for 35% affordable units. My understanding is that the local plan policy is for 50% of all new homes to be built over the thing. So what was that? And I did not understand page 100, 149. I mean, I don't know whether I can't understand the sentence, but it says officers have taken into consideration the MEFPA and the review undertaken on the LPA's behalf by BNPP. It is concluded that the scheme is unviable with an offer of 35% affordable housing. And then it says it is considered that this is a good offer. Therefore, in regards to affordable housing, the proposal is deemed to be acceptable. So I just hope that can be clarified. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Perhaps we could take those in reverse order. Sean, could I ask you to elucidate a bit the query that Councillor Dasgupta has made on paragraph 149 on page 100, which is about the viability?
Yep, so the application is deemed to be unviable in the tune of 13.5 million. And, you know, the applicant has come forward, they have offered an affordable housing offer at 35%, which is a good offer. You know, we have seen schemes where you'd have maybe less of an affordable housing offer on the basis of being unviable.
I mean, I think in layperson's terms, that means that based on the viability assessment, we wouldn't necessarily expect to see any affordable housing offer, but just based on that assessment. Could I please ask the applicants to respond to Rohit's questions about the significant loss of community space?
Yes, so I think, as you probably all appreciate, this has been a really difficult decision for us. And I think it's really important for us to step back and explain that this is about sustaining the future of the organisation. So we are not, if we do not change the way that we work and our reliance on community buildings, in the medium term, we will not exist anymore. So we're not going to go bust overnight. I don't want anyone to get that impression, but we need to make some radical changes. I think it's worth referencing that we've already made one of those. So Aston Mansfield is not just Derning Hall. So we have another, we have several properties actually, but the other main one of relevance is, used to be called the Proud Centre. It's now called the Aston Mansfield Community Centre, and it's in Manor Park. And we had to, made again what was a very difficult decision about changing some of the community space, effectively a sports hall, into a GP surgery. And that surgery is now opening on Monday. And that is the same pattern. It is about saying, so obviously for us, so we put in considerable capital to do that. And it's taken us 7 years because we were working through the NHS and the GPs, and it takes a long time. But it was about saying, actually, there's a win-win somewhere here. It's fantastic to have GPs in a community building, and the GPs needed to relocate, so their premises were not fit for purpose. So obviously, what we're doing in Forest Gate is different, but it is about saying we cannot afford to carry on doing what we're doing. It is not financially viable to just re-provide, which is there, what is existing there. So people talk a lot about the wonders of Derning Hall. The realities are that during the day, like all community spaces, as you guys will all know, because you run your own, the spaces are largely empty because obviously community activity tends to take place, with a few exceptions, in the evenings and weekends. So it's really difficult to make them work financially. So the reason we came to the conclusion we came to was because strategically our strengths are working with children and young people. So it made sense to focus around those. The premise for the pop-up space for young people is that it is a very different offer to what is available in Forest Gate. It's very rare to have an opportunity to take a high street trading environment and offer it to young people who might be, studying fashion and want 6 weeks to trade or something. So we wanted to do something that we could do uniquely, that wasn't just competing with what's going down the road in Forest Gate Youth Zone. And then the focus around the SEND children's space is because of the huge shortage of SEND provision in Newham. I mean, that's incredibly well documented. And we're acutely aware of that because we run some provision for SEND on our other site. So with the existing groups, we have got an agreement with All Saints Church and a commitment from Forest Gate Community School that they will work with us to accommodate groups where there's a good match, as it were. So obviously the space needs to be right and the price needs to be right. There are also some other community spaces available, and our intention is to work with the existing groups who are using Derning Hall to do everything that we can to help them find alternative accommodation. So even if it's brokering meetings, giving them information, supporting them with move, whatever it is appropriate that we can do. So I hope that goes some way to answering the question.
Thank you. But before I come to Jen, and then I've also seen Harvinder, Carleen, before I come to everybody, I wonder if I could ask officers a question, because I'm quite keen to tease out from a planning point of view what is and isn't possible regarding the provision of community space, because our planning policies will obviously identify the things that people need, which includes community space, but it's not clear to me, for example, to be blunt, that refusing this application would mean that Derning will go away and open up their halls and carry on as they were. I wonder what else there is we can do from the planning point of view to ensure the good provision of community space across Newham, because it strikes me that this is a really big issue.
Yeah.
Don't all speak at once.
Chair, if I can come in, I think it's probably more of a sort of strategic point, and the local plan is under review at the moment, and that's probably something to be addressed within that.
Yeah, if I want to come in.
Yeah, if I just come in on that, it's a gap in our evidence base at the moment, in that we don't know what we've got, and I mean sort of across the council, but also sort of privately provided space as we've got here, and we don't know what we need in terms of supporting our existing residents, but also in terms of the growth that's planned. So we've just commissioned a piece of work to fill that gap, but we've got an application before us, and we need to determine it on the basis of the information that's available. So it doesn't seem to matter where I sit. I look like a sort of an elf, but I think here it's a very finely balanced application where we've heard from the applicants that the current space isn't fit for purpose and they need to provide it, and they're keen to re-provide it. But obviously, we have to have a viable development, so there has to be some balance between sort of income generating elements of the proposals and also the social space, which on its own is probably not generating a particular amount of income, although I don't imagine that they let the space out for free. But I don't think we've got sufficient in our policies to say that because they're not doing a like-for-like replacement, that we could refuse it. And Sean has done a very thorough job of explaining that in his report and his presentation.
So where the London plan talks about the diminution of community space being acceptable if there are realistic proposals for re-provision, I guess my concern then is what if those spaces can't be found?
Well, I think it's about realistic re-provision. So here we have got re-provision, which is at a level which is viable, but we have to accept that it's not like for like. And I think the Newham policy, as it stands, is quite a good one, because unlike other places that I've worked, the policy does include the London plan policy, but also our current Newham local plan policy does look at trying to protect those spaces and see that they're provided, re-provided if they are under sort of threat of redevelopment. So I think the question that councillors have to ask themselves is whether the level of re-provision that's proposed as part of this application is acceptable. And from my point of view, I think it would be difficult on the basis of all of the information that's being provided to say that it isn't, although I fully understand and empathise with the comments that have been made by objectors.
Thank you. Members, I will now take questions from Jen. I think I then saw Carleen, then Harvinder, and then James, and then Joshua.
You sort of asked my question already, Rachel.
Sorry.
But my question is to Claire. I'm a fundraiser for charities, and I know that at the moment it's it's really tricky time. Trusts and foundations are pulling out on grants for kind of community buildings. So am I right in thinking that you've looked at refurbishment options and other options to keep the current arrangement? And what you are asking us to choose is to choose between a loss of around 1,500-ish, it's probably a little bit less than that, square metres of community space and no community space. And if that is correct, if this weren't to go through, how long would you have until you had to close and evict everyone?
So stepping back, we quite fortunate in that we have a range of income streams. So we have some endowment income, we have property related income, we have some earned income, and we have trust and foundation income and income from commissions or grants from LBN. But before COVID, we did a 5-year planning exercise, financial planning exercise, taking into account both major property developments. So both the site we're talking about tonight, the site in Manor Park that I mentioned, and the sale of some of our other properties to fund some of our investments. As you'll see from our public accounts, that means before COVID, we were looking at kind of 5 years of losses in order to then get to the new phase and the promised land. Obviously, COVID's extending that and making it longer. The reality for us, if we can't redevelop the Derning Hall site, we can't carry on as we are. So the most likely thing is we would just have to sell up, because we can't, what other option have we got? If we can't, there's a limited number of planning cycles we can put ourselves through. So that's where we are. And I apologise, I don't have in my head sort of where's the length of the cliff edge, but it's because we have some endowment income that is reasonably stable, assuming there are no big crashes, we have enough, but obviously we're eating into capital. So at some point in 10 years, 15 years, will no longer exist. And now so you're probably very familiar with charity law. So the obligation on the trustees is to be financially prudent and secure the future of the organisation. So they can't just, it would be unusual to make a decision to say, okay, we'll just keep. Plus, I mean, as I said, we've already had to close off parts of the site. I mean, it's keeping it safe enough, but we won't be able to carry on doing that too many more years. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Colleen.
Thank you, Chair. I have a few questions. But I guess what I want to start off with is just to thank all those that have turned up today to speak in regards to this specific application. And I think this is the most objections I've ever seen on an application that I've been present on. So thank you for your time. I have a couple of questions relating to the space, and I do appreciate that my colleagues have touched on it already. But Sean, you spoke about overall space of 2,004 square metres originally, going down to 307 square metres in your presentation. But then my documents I read, in actual fact, it is actually 194 square metres of community use floor space. Absolutely. And unless I was really, really poor at maths, that's a real reduction in floor space. And as much as I've listened to what's being said, I guess I have a question, not for you, Claire, I do have some questions for you. You, Claire, I'm not sure who's here today, but I'm assuming you may have an architect.
Architect, right.
So I guess my question for the architect is, have you really maximised this, maximate as much space as you possibly can for that community use? Because when I look at these plans, what I'm seeing is, this one actually, sorry. What I'm seeing is there's 2 community spaces which are allocated to send. And then there's this space that's allocated for a certain purpose. They're 2 separate spaces. So have you maximised the most out of this site as you possibly can in regards to that community space?
Right. Thank you for the question. Well, I think I have to say yes to that. I think what you can probably imagine is that the ground floor plan was something that took a long time to resolve. We looked at numerous options, not only about the community areas, but also about how car parking worked, how the amenity space worked, how the entrances for the cores and so on up to the residential worked. Of course, it's a really tight site to provide all those kind of elements of accommodation on the ground floor. And in terms of the community spaces, the youth enterprise space and the retail, those were all under pressure, as were all the other areas. And I think in the end, it's a balance to bring to the site the best design that we can produce in terms of not only where it sits in terms of the accommodation, but how it functions. The functionality of that ground floor is critical, you can imagine, in terms of moving on to other things besides the community space, but to balance that with how bikes and bins work, as you all know, core positions and how car parking, turning areas work, so access to cycle stores. It's a really tight little plan. I mean, it's enjoyable because it's tight. I have to say there's something rather nice about its compact quality, but it does put pressure on every single space. And I think there was always pressure on us trying to bring those community spaces as much as possible to the edges of the site, particularly onto the street. So there was visibility and there was interaction with the street. And I think we have done our very best to try and do that.
Sorry, Councillor, just to clarify another issue from a planning perspective. There are competing policy issues to deal with, as Sean alluded to in his presentation. So whilst we've got the community reprovision policies, we've also got the primary shopping frontage policies as well, which is why we've had to reprovide the retail. So that's obviously had an impact on the amount of community floor space that we could provide at ground floor level.
Okay.
Thank you. Did you have more questions?
Yeah,
Colleen?
sorry.
Go ahead.
Just with what you've said, and listening to your whole presentation, listening to the presentation of the officer, is it truly accessible? So that community space we're talking about, is it truly accessible considering you having to work within such a small space?
In terms of access from around its edges onto the site, yes.
Okay. And then I have another question in regards to the housing element. I note on page 35, the breakdown of the properties, that being 2% of shared ownership being studio flats and 1% being one bedroom. Specifically around the studio flats, I thought it was quite unpalatable for shared ownership products like this. So I wondered why we've decided that in that shared ownership piece that we would have studio properties in that.
Thank you for raising that. I had also made a note about the provision of studio flats, which we normally don't see in our applications because they really don't reflect the housing need of Newham, and certainly not the terrible stories that we all get in our inboxes from residents in need. Sean, are you able to comment on the different mixes of family and studio and one bedroom flats, please?
Yes, I can, and I would just say that the numbers are very small on the number of studio apartments. You know, there's 4 in total. Again, it's one of those things that's a bit of a balancing act, from my understanding, and the number of 3 beds has been maximised in order to provide the numbers they need, but the number of 3 beds is weighted heavily towards the London affordable rent. So that's the balance really, and I think the balance is probably in the right form to be able to maximise 3-bed family units. It's also, our policy talks about mixed and balanced communities, and that's a range of sizes and tenures. But yes, we don't encourage studio apartments, and we definitely wouldn't in large numbers.
Colleen, did you want to come back?
I won't come back. I assume you might want to come back on that piece. I have some other questions.
Okay, I did just want to ask you to clarify, Sean, particularly for the benefit of people who are here who haven't been to planning committees before. My understanding is that there's a whole variety of different types of housing that can be lumped in together under the headline affordable housing, which people are often quite sceptical of, and rightly so. But that within this, in particular, the product, the London affordable rent, is actually in numerical terms very close to social rent. So London affordable rent, as I understand, is one of the best affordable kind of homes that we can see. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Colleen, did you have further questions?
Yes, please, sorry.
Don't apologise, but go ahead.
So just going back to some of the representations from the objectors here today, and also the paperwork that we have received, I note the objectors spoke about consultation, and I just want to understand that a little bit better, that actually what was the process of consultation, because the objectors that are here today have made it very clear that they don't feel like it was the correct consultation. So I just wanted to take that out a little, just so we can understand as a committee how it is that you've gained your consultation and responses.
Sure. I can talk to that. We're part of the team that have been supporting Aston Mansfield with the consultation. So the plans were consulted on extensively over the course of last year. We held 2 primary rounds of consultation before the application went in. One last June, which was to introduce the initial ideas for the site and ask for feedback, and a further round of consultation last November, which was to report back on that feedback, share the comments and concerns, including some of the issues raised tonight that had been raised that first consultation, and share the detailed plans for comment as well. Obviously, in terms of process, we were consulting during the pandemic and there were all sorts of challenges around what we could and couldn't do. So following discussion with Newham officers, we held the consultation virtually using a range of different tools. So the consultation, exhibition boards and feedback surveys were hosted on our project website, derninghall.co.uk, which is still live today. And that was promoted using a wide range of different tools. So we had posters up at the site, we had adverts in the Newham Recorder, we had posts on Aston Mansfield social media channels, we emailed local groups, local politicians, businesses, residents, and we sent newsletters to over 3,600 addresses in the area for each round of consultation. We are mindful of, during that consultation, that obviously not everyone can engage online and would not prefer to fill in the online feedback form. So our newsletters had an option whereby people could request to receive a printed pack of all of the material on the website and a feedback survey. So sort of that was the process. In terms of outcomes, we had really high levels of engagement with that consultation. So we had 892 individuals looking at our website over the course of the consultation. We held 25 individual meetings throughout the consultation process with residents, local groups, local businesses, community partners, and we had 414 responses to our feedback surveys as well. And that's all captured within the statement of community involvement that's been submitted in the application, which, as Claire said in her speech, recognises the concerns that were raised and sort of sets out how we've responded to those concerns over the process too.
If I may, I'd be really keen to hear your response to the assertion from objectors and on behalf of others that some of the groups weren't aware that the space wasn't being re-provided as is, and their assertion that some of the groups still aren't aware that that's happening.
So pre-COVID, we had, as I said, I think I said before, around 60 odd groups very regularly using Derning Hall. And we also have, you know, shop tenants and people who rent office space. And before we launched the consultation, we wrote to all of those people explaining that we were going to launch a consultation, explaining what was going to happen and saying we'd be very happy to talk to them. So that was done just as COVID was hitting, really. So we, as part of the consultation process, we then communicated with people again. We did know that, so as I'm sure you guys all know, I mean, some of these community groups are very small and they're led by people who have very busy lives. So we knew we had to make some huge efforts to reach out because actually we didn't get much response. But we also actually found when we were reopening Derning Hall after we'd closed down, which presumably was in about the July or whatever it was, we found it extraordinarily difficult to contact groups. And so we did a lot of reaching out, and that is all documented and with the planning officers. But in the end, if people don't respond, it's extremely difficult. You can't really go and knock on, you know, to go and knock on their doors seems a bit intrusive. So obviously there's different viewpoints here, but we got the facts of exactly what we did and when we contacted people and who asked for meetings. I think the other thing worth bearing in mind is that to date, of those 60 odd groups, about 32 are now back at Derning Hall. And given that we've been open, so we reopened when we were allowed to, I think, I'm not sure that we're expecting many more to return, to be absolutely honest. I think it's either they found somewhere else or, you know, they have not been able to continue. So that would explain also if people were not sure that they would ever be coming back, they're probably less likely to be interested in engaging with us.
Thank you. Questions, Colleen?
I do have some, but I'll let the other people and then I'll come back later.
Thank you. Harvinder, could I bring you in, please?
While we talk about community spaces, from experience I can that when we say we're going to help community space, generally doesn't happen. That's reality. So on page 2 of the open letter, which is in our documentation, maybe Sean can answer this. Some of the information that's here says that the original date of the fire support at Mansfield was that some of the groups have ceased to use the location. Before then, some as long as November 2017, whilst the remaining groups is listed as having ceased in November 21. So some of the information seems to be more accurate to what I can read on the papers here. So that is a question which I have, in a sense. The second part is that you talk about helping the groups to relocate either to Forest Gate or one of the churches. What other places have you looked at, or other locations to help the groups to relocate? And my third question is, we are talking about 3-bedroom houses or flats being built there. We are saying there's going to be families living there. Can you confidently say that the schools and other facilities are actually available for those children if there are going to be children living there? Or are we just saying, yes, we're going to have these places, but there's no facilities? And we've said, and you've mentioned the fact that there are other local facilities, but you failed to mention, apart from two places, any other locations where these people can go. So the information which I can see and what I've heard makes me wonder with exactly what Carlin said about the consultation. We talk about pre-COVID, only 32 odd groups have come back. So it just shows that the consultation processes that were carried out were effectively not very effective as such. It was an exercise that was done to make sure that the application comes through to the planning committee. I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you. If I could perhaps ask the applicants to respond, and then I will bring in officers to talk to us about what assessment they've made of the child yield from this proposed development and about school places or other infrastructure that might be necessary. Could I hand to the applicants first?
Yes, so it is quite upsetting to hear that you believe that we are trying to do something that effectively means we're lying about what we've done. I mean, we work in genuine good faith. We have a set of values, and we ran that consultation process in the best way we could, given the circumstances that we were living in.
I'm reading from the documents I've got here.
Okay, so I don't quite understand what the issue is in those documents. I was finding it a little bit difficult to hear you, but I will talk to you about the other space available. So we have done in the past few years, we did an initial mapping exercise, which we then updated, and all of that information has been provided to look at what types of community space were available in the area. The reason I only mentioned those two organisations, Forest Gate Community School and the church, was because they are the ones that have specifically said, yes, we are prepared to commit on paper to working with you on this. There's a range of other community spaces, as you guys all know, I mean, some of you are familiar with Forest Gate, that are also available, and all of that has been documented. I think it will be a matter of us working with groups to figure out what's available, what fits with their needs, and how we can broker things. And the community access strategy and the other two strategies, the reaccommodation strategy and the relocation strategy, all of which will be a planning condition in section 107, commit us by law to what we will be doing. So there's a level of accountability there that may be a bit unusual in planning applications.
I'll just add a bit, just a couple of other points of clarification. So I think the reason why we engage with both the school and the church was primarily around the availability of a larger hall space, which clearly we aren't re-providing as part of the proposals. So that's why we've specifically kind of approached them. We also did an audit of available community space within a much larger distance, but we've looked at a kind of 15-minute walking radius of the site, identified 15 available facilities in that area, and this was conducted in May 2021. and those range from faith buildings, so Baptist Church, for example, Forest Gate Community School, which we've already spoken about, sports and leisure facilities, so the Atherton Leisure Centre. So we have undertaken a more rigorous analysis, and I think that's primarily the purpose of the community access strategy, which we've committed to, is to explore those opportunities further prior to development of the site.
Can I just add, I think I might have confused things slightly. So there's a difference between I illustrated the kind of drop in organisations who are using Derning Hall, and we don't know. I mean, it may be that more of them come back. Actually, that's just an unknown because of COVID. That doesn't mean we haven't still continued reaching out to our consultation of people of the list of groups using Derning Hall has always been based on those organisations who used Derning Hall before COVID. So we didn't just say, well, because you haven't come back and we've opened and closed and opened and closed, we'll take you off the list. I think what I was trying to say is that it's one thing to reach out, it's another thing to have people respond. And we have done as much reaching out as it's feasible to do without actually just going and banging on people's doors, which I think would have been a step too far. And I don't mean residents, I mean people leading community groups.
Thank you. Could I ask the officers, please, to come back on the second part of Councillor Singh Verdi's question, which was about pointing out the proportions of family accommodation, which are obviously welcome in policy terms, but also asking about the impact of those additional numbers of people, particularly on school places.
Thank you, Chair. So we did consult Newham's Education Department, and they haven't responded to our consultation. So we've also received representations from Forest Gate Community School, and we haven't picked up on any issues regarding provision or capacity. But the site is also in a very high PTAL area, adjacent to a train station, and I am aware of schools in the locality.
I wonder whether we could maybe make a note to take away to our colleagues in education that when we consult them about school places, we do really need to hear back from them about what is there and what is needed. I know that they do a lot of forecasting work and they've done a lot of expansion and working with schools, but I think a lack of response is a bit shoddy, to be honest. Councillor Garfield, can I bring you in, please?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions. Firstly, really pleased to see the provision of cycle storage on the site at the level that it is. I think that's a really welcome proposal, and I'm glad that development is car-free. I wondered, however, and this I think would be appropriate for our colleagues in transport, if they're with us, how much of, or if any, of the community infrastructure levy will be allocated to improving the cycle infrastructure from the site to elsewhere in the vicinity. So I'm namely thinking of Earlham Grove, I'm thinking of Forest Lane, I'm thinking of Wood Grange Road as it stands. Excellent to build something with that level of cycle infrastructure in terms of parking and encouraging people not to be using their cars, but to then expect them to cycle on Wood Grange Road as it is now. And I'm a cyclist and I find the road terrifying. It's somewhat, I can't think of the correct adjective, but perhaps if we could be enlightened as to what investment is planned for the nearby roads to facilitate the provision that the applicant has proposed regarding cycle infrastructure.
Thank you. Could I bring in our transport colleague, please, Ian?
Yes, good evening, everyone. I can give you a part answer for that. The applicant's going to be making a Section 106 contribution, which I understand is £30,000, which will go towards improving cycle infrastructure in the locality of the site. And my understanding is that the most likely use for that is going to be to formalise the modal filters at the Wood Grange and at the junction with Wood Grange, where you've got the temporary arrangement in there now. I'm afraid I can't answer the question as to the proportion of still money that may go towards anything, because I know that there's often a process to go through with how that actually gets allocated. But I do know that there will be a 106 contribution coming forward, which will be to formalise and improve the modal filter at the junction.
That is welcome, thank you. And perhaps again, Shirley, I might ask you to make a note to take back to our colleagues in transport planning that with some of the developments and applications we're looking at on Woodgrange Road, which are car-free, we would really like them to think more about how people safely walk and cycle on that road, which, as Joshua has said, is not always a pleasant or safe experience. Did you want to come back at all?
On that one, no, I'm satisfied, but I do have a second question.
Go ahead.
I had questions regarding the height of the development. Now, I imagine, I can presume, the applicant's answer to this question. I think this is more of a question for our officers, but if I may be frank, 10 stories for a P-Tower level 5, right above a Crossrail station, to me, seems insanely low. I mean, I live in an area that is 20 minutes walk from the nearest tube station, and there are buildings on my road that are 25 stories. 150 Stratford High Street is one of the tallest residential developments in Europe and is nowhere near a P-Tower level rating of this. I look at the proposals and I think lots of the things that we've heard regarding a loss of community space, a level of affordable housing that is less than ideal, are things that I reckon could have been mitigated by increasing the height of this development, which is something I know the applicants wanted. And I would go so far as to say that 15 isn't ambitious enough. So why, from our office colleagues, are we building something when we're supposed to be planning for the future on top of a Crossrail station that is only 10 stories? That seems to me like we're missing out on an opportunity to house more families in Newham and provide more infrastructure for people who want to travel sustainably to where they live and live in the local area. When we're building, we have built things that are triple that height down the road in Stratford, even further from the station.
Could I ask officers to come back on the question of height, please?
Thank you, Chair. So during the pre-application process, you will have seen that the proposals were initially for 15 stories. Having mentioned all of the competing interests on the site to, have the bin stores, retail, the community provision itself, we were finding that actually it seemed to be, struggling to fit all of those things in. 15 stories would potentially increase the amount of car parking spaces on the ground floor and add pressure. So we think that 10 stories is an appropriate height in regards to fitting all those things in on the ground floor. I can hand over to the strategic design manager if he has any further points to add on that.
Good evening, committee. Only to add really that it's a great sustainable site in a town centre next to the Crossrail, but it's also within a conservation area and on the cusp of another one. So it was about balancing those two kind of competing issues, and we felt that actually, in addition to the issue Sean's mentioned about the pressure on the ground floor, 10 stories felt a sort of good balance.
If I could follow up with the applicant, I'm curious, if you were allowed to build taller, do you think that you would have been able to provide community space?
Yes. Is that for me? I mean, it's a challenging question really, because I think what Ben has said and Sean is absolutely right in terms of the scale of the footprint of the site, which is really quite small. And so you are under pressure in terms of viability about if it goes too much higher. 15 we thought was possible, but I think for various reasons that you've just heard that we agreed that 10 would be, and even the design review panel agreed, liked the idea of height, but I think agreed ultimately that 10 was about right. I think if you go anything too high, then you're into things like going down in the ground to provide accommodation, making podiums, all these kind of things which increase, it will put pressure on the viability. And I think what we were looking at was trying to make a scheme that was quite intimate and discreet, didn't rely on things like podiums, didn't rely on going down to the ground. So avoiding issues of putting pressure on viability. So it is, as the officers rightly said, it's a balancing act between what is right in terms of, I mean, I think as architects, we were really interested in the idea of it being a bit taller, as you suggest, because we felt that might really be appropriate for its location within Forest Gate. But actually, in the end, I think we all felt quite comfortable with where it's now sitting for all the other pressures that obviously are put on the site.
Okay, so going to all of the cost more and therefore not guaranteed additional community space is what you're saying.
It's a balancing act, yeah, exactly.
I appreciate that. Thank you, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Beckles.
Thank you, Chair. My question is around, one, the design of the building, and as it is a conservation area, and we've seen a very nice presentation about the brickwork, the look, the feel of the building. Is it really going to be in line, in tone with the local surrounding area, considering the age of the town centre, its feel? My second question was about sustainability. Now, reading on page 129, all about energy sustainability, it's all about boilers, BREEAM ratings, but I think this is quite an interesting area. You know, it's up and coming, design work that's happening locally. I think the building could be slightly more exciting. It could offer a bit more in terms of architectural look and flavour. You think Newham and the plan, the ambitions of how a mayor, not least, that impacts this planning application. But my colleague, Councillor Garfield, touched on Stratford and things like the Olympic area there and the ambitions that are being shown. I just wonder, from the designs and the look, is there possibilities for greening, changing the design to make it much more in time, much slightly, if you want to take it back in time, slightly retro, fits in the area, the tone, the look, and also being a bit more experimental with the design of the buildings, not just boilers, which don't have an impact on the builds of London rents, but just in the look of the area, adding to the sustainability. We're just a week from COP26, talking about future-proofing our buildings. And I just wonder, is this building future-proof?
Thank you. Could I ask perhaps first the applicant, and then I'd like to bring in Ben Hull as well to comment on the issues James is raising around sustainability and also design.
If I come back on the design of the buildings, I suppose these are larger buildings compared to obviously the residential buildings in the locality. So unashamedly, we're looking at something quite different in terms of architectural expression, probably. But actually, I think we were really interested in responding to the buildings that surround the site in terms of the conservation area. So whilst the buildings are bigger, 6 and 10 stories, what they do is draw upon in a more abstract manner and a contemporary way, admittedly, but I think that's what we were interested in trying to do within a building of this scale. We're still responding to the material qualities of the buildings that surround the site, very much in terms of the Victorian villas, both in the conservation area on the east side of the site and also down Earlham Grove, that we're using the buff brick of the area. We're using white detailing around windows. There's this interesting thought that we had about the expression of individual flats, which is a little bit different, obviously, the houses themselves, but the expression and identifying individual flats within the elevation via the white detailing that runs across the lower elements of the windows and joins all the windows up between the flats of the same windows of a similar flat, same flat. And I think whilst that's a more abstract way of using window detailing that's white bricks that's buff in its colour, it's trying to draw upon still the idea of framing windows, but in a more abstract and contemporary way. And I do think it is a direct response to the locality. It's a direct response to the historic buildings in the area, albeit in an abstract and a more contemporary manner for a larger building. So it is actually, I think, trying to be on one level fresh, but on another level expressive of the area. And I think there are things like, the quality of that. I think we were had good discussions at the design review panel about this, about maintaining the quality of the facade. If you're going to make a bigger building, then it's key that the surfaces and the elevations are good quality. And I think we had good discussions with them about that, and they were very satisfied with the way in which was developing and has now finally developed in relation to the modelling within the depths of windows in the reveals, i.e. it's not a flat, it has a brick depth to the windows from the brick, i.e. it creates shadow, it creates modelling. Again, too, with the balcony details and the delicacy of the balustrades and how they work, they're all an integral part about how the elevations are made up. And I think they have integrity and a repetition on one level, but a variety on another, whereby we were encouraged at the design review panel to think about a hierarchy within the elevations, which we didn't have to start off with, i.e. the hierarchy whereby the major elevations onto Earlham Grove and Woodgate Road had more articulation surfaces and perhaps less so in the confines of the courtyard, which we did bring into that. And so now you have quite a rich change and hierarchy between the elevations throughout the scheme.
Thank you. I know that our papers show the minutes of the various rounds of consultation with the design review panel, which certainly looked, from my reading of them, to have been very positive, which obviously as committee members is really reassuring. I wondered, Ben, was there anything that you wanted to add from a design point of view? Because I know that concerns about the design and about the visual impact of the building were some of the other issues brought up by objectors.
Yeah, just to say that there was 3 review panel meetings. A lot of the focus, as Chris has alluded to, was initially on the kind of the ground floor plan, which were well resolved throughout the process, and the panel acknowledged that it had improved. Also, there was strong support for a kind of contextual use of the brick and the precast detailing with lots of kind of depth and modulation in the facades, which was felt to be a kind of appropriate response to the character of the conservation area, and actually in comparison to the existing building, just sort of building on the positive characteristics of the surroundings. And that's it really. I think it's been a positive process, and obviously design can be subjective, and that's why we have the review panel to kind of discuss these issues and kind of come to a kind of broad consensus about design quality. And I think obviously, you know, lots of design work is still to come after planning, and how it's constructed is critical. So having robust conditions about materials and detailing and requiring actual full-size panels to be erected for sort of inspection is an important part of the ongoing process of securing that design quality, which I believe is proposed in the decision notice, subject to approval, obviously.
Thank you. I can see a question from Hanif and also a follow-up from Carleen and further questions. I do have a couple of questions myself. I'm very aware this is taking a long time, but I also think this is a really big and controversial application, and it's right that we give it good consideration. Hanif, could I bring you in first, please?
Thank you, Chair.
Saying is, if it's possible to answer questions quickly, that would be.
It'll be a very quick question because thanks to colleagues, they've covered the main questions I was going to ask about consultation. Because in any of these big developments, I'm always concerned how objectors and developers fail to engage properly and talk to each other. And I appreciate the fact that obviously you've done everything you can. So my question is, I suppose, and I was not going to ask this, but then I thought maybe I'll regret it if I don't, because of the scale of this development and because of the historical nature of the actual hall and Aston Mansfield. Do you think on reflection, that's a question to the applicants, do you think on reflection and in hindsight, you could have, considering the historic some of the relationships that you have with some of the occupants, you know, some of them said that they started their life maybe 100 years ago in the same place. You could have done more to engage and maybe come to some sort of a better understanding, because it's, like Carleen said, it's one of the biggest number of objections I've seen for a number of years. So that's a question to the applicants. Do you think on reflection we could have done more basically to bridge the gap? And if I'm able to, Chair, just maybe one user in terms of reaching out, you know, some of them said some things like, you know, they didn't know about things. What exactly did they do maybe one, you can choose amongst yourselves because we haven't got much time. What did you do to reach out if you felt that the applicants or the Aston Mansfield was not communicating with you properly?
Thank you. Could I go back to the applicants first and then to the objectors if you'd like to respond?
So I'm sure we could have done things better. I think there's always learning, there's always hindsight. I have no doubt we could have done things better. I think probably had we not done it all, doing these things virtually, as we all know, is not ideal. But we weren't in a position just to say, okay, we'll delay everything until when would it be safe to do this? If you remember back in, we did delay the consultation, but by a few months. But then we just had to make a decision that we can't just live in limbo for the next how many years. I think it's always very hard in a way to have genuinely open conversations when quite a lot is at stake. And I do think doing it virtually made it even harder. I'm very confident that anyone who reached out to us, whether it was through Canada, the communication consultancy who were working with us, or it was directly to anyone, any of our staff or any of our volunteers or to me or anyone, then we engaged. I'm very confident about that. If people want to engage with us, we're delighted and we talk. That's probably the most I can say. But yeah, of course, things differently, and I'm sure we could have done them better.
Thank you. Would any of the objectors like to respond? Kay?
Like Rachel is Laura, who's on the Zoom to answer this, because Laura has been involved right from the very beginning in terms of consultation. She knows about when people were asked and were not asked. And also the question about whether, yes, there were a lot of responses, but how many of them were positive?
Laura, could I bring you in?
Yes. I mean, I suppose. I mean, what I would say is that 208 flyer letters were sent out. 202 were returned. That's an incredible return, and only 3 of them were positive. Now that says something about the feeling that people have about this community building, which I have a very good and long-standing relationship with. It's part of our lives. And I was stunned when I saw the amount of people that returned comments saying things about the height of the building, the community space, everything. 80% of the community space is going. That is an enormous amount. So, I mean, I'm very troubled by the fact that the Scouts felt that they weren't consulted, because, of course, they are someone who's been here in Derning Hall probably one of the longest. So it is very worrying that people felt, of course, I'm sure that they could have done better, and I know they think they could have done better, but I think it's incredibly worrying when long-standing community groups feel they haven't been consulted.
Thank you. I did.
Is there no chance I think I can answer Councillor's question directly?
Go ahead.
Because I have personally interviewed a lot of the user groups there, and what they say is they may have received the consultation letters sent by Aston Mansfield, but that the language and the tone of those letters did not make clear to them that there would be an impact on them. So they said the letters came across as shiny flyers talking about the positive sides of the mixed-use development. And if there had been a single line in any of those letters which said, the new community space is not for you, they would have jumped up and responded. And I think it's very telling that before I came across the application, there were only 7 objections. And since I've gone around and spoken to as many people as I can in Forest Gate, we're now up to over 200. And it's been because of me, not because of London Borough Newham or Aston Mansfield. The timing of that is not coincidental. And there are several group
groups who've posted objections that are in your portal objections, who say it was not until a Forestgate resident reached out to me to tell me the impact on my group that I knew about that. That is me.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions. I wanted to understand a bit more about the proposals for the youth enterprise space, which is not the kind of thing we've come across before. And I wanted to ask you a bit about, is that something that you're proposing that Aston Mansfield would run? Would you envisage linking up with the council youth provision, Brighter Futures and the other things that we're doing? I'm also interested to know about the interaction between the negotiated partial use of some of that youth enterprise space as community use, and whether those two things are going to be in conflict at all, and whether you have any thoughts on how that might be managed.
So the first question, so our vision for this space is that we would sort of facilitate it and curate it, and certainly use it sometimes for some of the young people we work with, but that primarily it's about working in partnership with local authority, with other voluntary organisations, with the school and college. And we've had a number of conversations with people like West Ham United Foundation, Community Links. I've talked to various people in the council. We've talked to Forestgate Community School. We've talked to Earlham Grove Primary School, and they've all got various interests in how they might, they're all quite excited about it, and they could all see different ways in which they could make it work. And most of them would say, actually, you should also talk to so-and-so, and you should talk to so-and-so. So that's the intention, that it's, you know, we look after the space and we sort of curate it, as it were. And as I said, we would probably want to use it for some of our direct delivery. In terms of balancing how the youth enterprise space gets used and how we balance with the community space, we have put down some numbers around that. So first of all, you know, there are times when we're much less likely to be working with young people. So that could be, you know, exam periods, be obviously during the day. It could be later on in the evenings. So that's the kind of thinking we're trying to do around how do we maximise the use of the space. And in a way, when you think about it, it's in our interests to maximise the use of the space. The last thing we want is empty space. And it will need some really careful, detailed design work around how can it, I mean, this vision is about saying, in what ways can we create high street space and take advantage of being on the high street in different formulations? So, you know, for example, when I talked to Forestgate Community School, they were very interested in drama and performance because they, and using it for that kind of space. When I talked to the college, we were talking more about, you know, fashion students or who are making things and having it as a trading space. How do we combine that and make it flexible enough that it could also be used as effectively as meeting space as well? So that we do still need to work through.
Could I please ask officers, I remember some concern from objectors about how the youth enterprise space might be protected, and in particular how it might, you know, the idea that it might then be changed in future into something else under changes of use and permitted development. Could I get an officer response to that, please?
So there's a condition to retain the community use, and that stays for as long as the development shall exist. So, you know, it's secured, and it, you know, the other retail units are secured as retail. So that again is.
Am I right that those conditions supersede changes of use under permitted development?
In my opinion, yes, they do, but I'm, you know, you may want to take a legal view on that.
Amanda, did you want to come in?
Sorry, do you want to ask me that question again?
I'm keen to know about how the retail space and the youth enterprise space and the community use space are protected against any future changes of use. There were some concerns from the objectors that they might be changed under permitted development in ways that are not reflected in this application. And I just want to really nail down how much we've protected the proposed uses and how much danger there is of other things happening later.
So this is the application before us for the use, which will be consented. And if you choose to consent it, then permitted development provided is quite a large range of things you've just asked me, will apply to the site unless it's been removed by an Article 4 direction. I don't believe there's an Article 4 direction, so they will have the benefit of permitted development for the site. There are requirements for permitted development, depending which section you apply for, and notices to be served to the local authority, which would allow us to identify issues and other things. So that is the position in relation to permitted development for this site. I have a question from Sean, who very kindly asked me if we can remove permitted developments in a condition. We can't. It has to be done by an Article 4 direction, specifically in itself, which will be made for this site and or an area. So you'd have to have justification and reasoning, and it's quite extensive for removing those rights, as opposed to, it's quite a high threshold or test in order to remove those rights. So just like any other application, they can take the benefit of it, provided they comply with the section and serve the right notices and contact the authority. Does that help?
That does help. That sounds like it's a broader issue about all of our planning applications rather than specifically about this one. And I wondered if we could perhaps ask officers to take that away. I know that there's a limited amount we can do. Permitted development exists and is brought in by the government precisely to tie planning authorities' hands, if you like. But within the confines of what legal powers we do have, we want to try to make sure that we're getting uses out of developments as they appear to us in applications, that they don't change later. I'm sure if we did give consent to the application, then our good relationship with Aston Mansfield and long-standing history there would help. But that's not quite the assurance that people might want.
Chair, you have got condition 32 on page 149 that restricts the use. So hopefully that would give you some comfort that we will maintain what's proposed as part of this application in perpetuity.
That's helpful, thank you. Colleagues, I know we're all getting tired. I could see there were some follow-up questions. I'm keen to start to wrap things up, so if you could bear that in mind. Carleen.
Thank you. I'm going to be really quick, so I'm just going to say what I'm going to say and then work it out between us. So what I wanted just to touch on, and it would be remiss of me if I didn't speak about the one thing that really, really is close to my heart, and that's special education needs and disabilities. And I just want to thank the applicants for their consideration in regards to what you've put in your application. However, we've heard from the residents here today that have spoken about the use of what seems to me to be a well-used and well-loved space. And the fact that they may not be able to use that space no longer because it wouldn't meet the needs or wouldn't be available is something that they've spoken quite a lot about. So it almost sounds to me that there needs to be an exact answer to those residents in regards to those specific concerns. But I just want to understand that send provision piece. And I see, I've got a couple of questions. So I see where they will be on the drawings. I'm not very good with maths or spaces. So I don't know what 91.5 square metres looks like. But it doesn't sound like an awfully large space when I look at the accessible cycling store, which is 63.3. So I'm just wondering, what actual space is that in relation to that provision of young people that have needs? And you will know, Claire, because this is your day job, that actually there would need to be a sufficient space to keep young people safe at all times, depending on the level of need. I also want to ask, will this site be gated? And has there been any consideration in regards to designing out crime when these spaces are not being used by communities, organisations, or as such? How is it that this space will be kept safe, especially when you have such vulnerable residents that may be in those spaces? I think that was it.
I could take the second one in terms of security. we consulted with Secure by Design. We've actually designed out some of the issues, if not all of the issues that they raised in relation to hidden corners. It is a gated courtyard, so that it is secure. And there are various aspects around the periphery of the site in terms of recesses and so on that we've reduced in terms of dimension because there was some concern about hidden corners, as I said a moment ago. So beyond that, I think we can say that all the elements within the courtyard are secure because of that gated element onto the street. And otherwise, anything on the periphery of the site is also safe and secure because of we designed and worked closely with Secure by Design on that in terms of their responses.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to respond to the type of send provision that this application proposes?
Yeah, so I think we are talking about quite small group work. They're not huge halls. Earlham Primary School are very interested in using the space during the day because they don't have great facilities. So that's one of the things we've actively worked on with them. We obviously also are acutely aware of the safety issues. So it would always be staffed space. So, I mean, the idea is a bit like the youth enterprise space that we would use it, but many other organisations could also use it, but it would always have staff running the activities in the appropriate ratios. I'd imagine, all of the organisations who are likely to use it would have expertise in working with children with SEND. One of the things we are thinking about is the environment of Forest Gate and the level of, antisocial behaviour, drugs, crime, gangs and all the rest of it, and how we manage all of that. And we're also thinking about, I think we would have to be very careful about not mixing age groups. So that's something we keep an eye on anyway in all of our work. But we know, there's an evidence base that if you're not careful, if you're working with younger people, that they can be targeted when they're coming in and out of space. I mean, because of where the site is at the moment, there are a lot of safety issues there because of the nature of Forest Gate. And in a way, being able to design something from scratch when we can, as we've heard, design out some of the big problems we have on the site just because it was built in the 60s and no one clearly thought about lines of sight and all the rest of it, will be a great thing.
Thank you. Thank you. Any further questions before I wrap things up and bring us to the vote? Joshua.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very quick, but I have two questions. I'll do them very quickly. I was slightly concerned by the number of homes which are solely single aspect and wondered architecturally what had been done to prevent solar gain during a heat wave. Because I know that there are buildings in Newham that suffer from terrible solar gain because they were built single aspect without consideration for ventilation or appropriate conditions as we continue to warm through the summer. And I wasn't sure that I saw any detail about a recess of windows from bricks, there being any designed in shade. Is there any certainty as to the maximum temperature that these single aspect homes would reach during a heat wave of, say, 35, 38 degrees Celsius in August?
Well, I can't bring the detail to that, but all I can say is it's generally been tested as a scheme in relation to all those issues. Window sizes, etc., in terms of solar gain and so on, have been designed accordingly to make sure that that solar gain isn't excessive and is within the limits of what is acceptable. So, in terms of and that's been tested on all the flats around the scheme, whether they're east or west facing or south facing.
Okay, but is there anything you can talk us through in terms of specific design elements that have prevented, beyond just the window quality, that have prevented excessive solar gain? Because I know
it's like, for instance, stacking balconies, projecting balconies, of course, overhanging off a shade to the windows beneath. That's an intrinsic part of how you actually reduce solar gain into what are the largest windows, which are the living spaces, and the living spaces generate the positions of the balconies normally. So whilst they are bigger windows, the actual overhangs of balconies.
Okay, because there are only a handful of the flats which are double aspects, and two I've noticed per floor that are triple aspects. My second question, because I accept that we've had it answered, is on the tenure split among the buildings. So I know, forgive me, I forget which is A, B, and C, but in one of the buildings, the one which is not an L shape, more of an oblong, that is primarily private, apart from the first floor, where you've got some shared ownership, and the L-shaped building is affordable rent and shared ownership with no private accommodation whatsoever. So could somebody talk us through the decision that was arrived at with regards to splitting those homes, whereby one of them would have no private cell homes whatsoever, and the other would have all of the private cell homes?
You want me to do that? Yeah. So there's probably a couple of issues there. First, and no doubt you've heard it before, there's always an issue with regards to housing associations and tenure calls, impact that has on service charge. Yeah. So that's often, one of the main drivers in terms of trying to keep tenures located in similar calls. And then the fundamental decision, I suppose, with regards to where those units were allocated was based on the percentage of affordable homes that it was that, nearly the 35% fit within block 2, as it's known. The remainder of the units were provided in block 1.
So is there any difference in terms of facilities for each block, or in terms of access, or in terms of the space in the lobby, or any other amenities, be it the quality of one's doorbell or the reliability of the lift, that differs from block to block? I mean, and if there isn't, and if you're about to tell us that there isn't, can we ensure that that is a promise that is minuted and quoted to yourselves?
As far as I'm aware, I mean, in terms of design, the buildings are tenure blind. All of the cores have access to the same amenity spaces, so there's no separation of amenity whatsoever. So yes, there is not the poor door and the rich door.
No, these spaces have been designed in very similar manners. Obviously not exactly the same, but in terms of the areas and the facilities and the access, etc., to them, and how they feed the common corridors above, exactly the same.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification. If we can ensure that that truly is attributed to the applicants, so that should we receive any complaints in the future, we can revert back to these. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, I'm keen to draw us towards the vote. Could I please ask officers if you could share the screen again and put up the decision that's proposed to us? So this is the officer recommendation before us, which is, as you see, I won't read all of that out, but is in 3 parts, including agreeing the reasons for approval. Can I please ask those in favour of this officer recommendation to raise their hands? That is unanimous. Thank you very much. That concludes item 6 on the agenda. I think we all deserve a comfort break. I'm going to suggest that we take 10 minutes. Thank you very much for that.
We're going on pause. Joy, can you turn the mics off?
No, don't worry. I'm just checking what.
They don't care.
I got a phone call. Yeah, no, she was late.
I'll just press the button.
Yeah.
No. I'm just like, where do you start? Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry. No, don't worry at all. Okay, we are now streaming again. Thank you, colleagues.
Let me just remove the.
I'm just waiting for the Zoom participants to be brought back. Thank you. I'd like to thank everyone for their patience and for their diligence with the last application. We will move smartly on with the rest of the agenda. Item 7 is Warehouse K. Could I ask, please, whether the applicant would like to speak on this item or whether you're happy to just be available to answer questions?
I've got something prepared to speak to committee on, if that's okay.
No, of course, that's your right. Please go ahead.
Sorry, do you have a presentation you want to share or?
No, it's just a written speech.
Go ahead. I think you have 5 minutes, isn't that right? You'd have 5 minutes.
Okay. Yeah. Good evening, Chair. Thank you very much. My name is Katrina Hulse, and I'm a planning partner at Cushman and Wakefield. So is everything okay?
Yeah, no, please go ahead.
Yes, okay. And I advise the Ministry of Justice on planning matters, including the proposal for a new passport office at Warehouse K. Currently, the Passport Office have facilities at Globe House in Eccleston Square, and they've occupied this building since about 2000. The lease of that building is due to come to an end in 2022, and due to its size, age and condition of the building, it doesn't meet HM Passport Office existing or future requirements. The availability of Warehouse K, which the Home Office lease, has recently been refurbished and meets their existing and future operational requirements. The refurbishment works of Warehouse K Annex included both internal and external amendments and were granted the necessary consents in 2019. This application only seeks a change of use and no external alterations are proposed, and therefore the historic integrity of the historic building will be retained. The new Passport Office proposed for Warehouse K would only issue passports to UK citizens, both new applications and renewals of existing passports, as is currently the case at Globe House. The Passport Office would undertake customer-facing passport applications, including a premium service, allowing passports to be issued on the same day. HMPO has recently been working towards enhancing their digital services, providing a quicker and more efficient passport issuing service. Facilities are also proposed within the new facility for interviewing passport applicants where this is necessary. All of these functions are carried out currently at Globe House. The public-facing element of the proposal will be carried out on the first floor of Warehouse K, accessed directly from Western Gateway, and will have similar characteristics to a bank, building society, or similar public-facing service provider, such as a job centre. The opening hours will be Monday to Friday, 7:30 to 5:30, and on Saturday, 8 to 4 o'clock, but they won't be open on Sundays and bank holidays. One of the key locational criteria for the passport is that it's located close to good quality transport links. The current facilities at Globe House is close to Victoria Station, and the proposed new facility at Warehouse K is equally well located in close proximity to a range of public transport infrastructure, allowing visitors to the site to use public transport rather than private motor vehicles. Indeed, the new Passport Office does not provide any car parking for either staff or visitors. 58 cycle parking spaces are proposed for staff and will be located in the 2 basement areas accessed off Seagull Lane. The 2nd and 3rd floors of the premises will house back office staff, including headquarters staff involved in a number of functions, including policy, design, development and implementation, as well as senior leadership, finance and HR services. It is envisaged there will be a range of different roles for staff, including customer-facing staff, operational support, workplace management, strategy and digital services. HMPO anticipate that on opening, they expect to see approximately 90 passport applicants per hour spread across 4 15-minute slots. All passport slots are by appointment only, and customers will be asked to attend no more than 15 minutes before their appointment. This will assist in customer management both inside and outside the Passport Office. Over the next 18 to 24 months, that number is expected to reduce to 70 customers per hour and ultimately 50 as the service becomes more digitised. The application proposal, if granted planning permission, would only allow the use of Warehouse K as a passport office and for no other use. A restrictive condition is proposed, which the HMPO has agreed to. Overall, the location of the passport office to London Borough of Newham will bring a number of benefits, including contributing towards employment and continued diversification of the borough's economy, more administrative public sector jobs, and contribution of circa £175,000 to carbon offsetting scheme. I trust that you recognise the benefits of the scheme and are able to support your officer recommendation to grant planning permission for the application proposal. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Since we have no objectors requesting to speak, I'll hand over to Harriet Beattie, who's the officer for this application, and trust, given the length of tonight's meeting, that you'll be sticking to the really key items that we need to be considering.
Certainly, Chair. Thank you very much. I'm just sharing my screen now. Chair, please can you confirm that you can see my slideshow?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good evening, members and members of the public. The application I'm presenting today is at Warehouse K on Western Gateway in the Canning Town South Ward. I'd like to draw members' attention to the officer's update. This is the application site outlined in yellow. To the north of the site is the DLR line and Custom House Station. In the future, the Elizabeth line will be delivered to the north of the site. To the east is the XL Centre. To the south of the site is Western Gateway. Warehouse K is Grade 2 listed. The listing description describes it as being an original Victoria Dock tobacco warehouse constructed of stock brick with a slate roof. To the southwest of the site is Warehouse W, and this is also a Grade 2 listed building. The surrounding area comprises a mix of uses, including retail, hotels, and residential. These are some photographs of the site. The photograph on the left is the southern elevation, and the photograph on the right is the northern elevation of Warehouse K. The application proposal is for the change of use of Warehouse K, the basement units 1B and 1E, first floor, second floor, and third floor, from offices, which fall under use class E, to a passport office, which falls under the use class sui generis. This application site is a Grade 2 listed building and affects the setting of a Grade 2 listed building, Warehouse W. This is the proposed basement floor. Only part of the basement is subject to internal changes, and this floor area will accommodate changing rooms and cycle storage in addition to plant and other general storage. This is the proposed first floor. This is the area which involves public interaction. This floor consists of counters and booths with waiting rooms for customers. There's also some back office floor space with meeting rooms and print rooms. This is the second floor, which consists of open plan office with meeting rooms and a multi-faith room. And this is the third floor, which again shows open plan office and meeting rooms. All of these are to provide Her Majesty's Passport Office function. First key area of assessment is the principle of the development, and whether the proposal will comply with the development plan. The proposal will relocate the Passport Office from its current site at Victoria in central London to Warehouse K, and there will be circa 500 staff on site. The Passport Office's role is to process applications for and to issue passports to UK citizens. There's no function of the Passport Office facility which relates to immigration control, the assessment of whether a person can become a UK citizen, or detention. The proposal will secure Warehouse K site for long-term employment. National government service that the Passport Office provides is considered appropriate in this employment hub setting. The proposal will add to employment opportunities in the borough and will support the vitality and viability of the employment hub and Royal Docks area. As the council is not supportive of an immigration control function on the site a condition has been attached which restricts the use of the building to a passport function only. The proposal is considered to comply with the development plan, and with the attachment of a condition controlling the use of the site, the principle of the development is supported. In regards to the impact on employment, circa 500 members of staff will be located with the new passport office. The proposal is for change of use and does not involve any construction or notable fit out. As such, no heads of terms have been attached regarding the construction phase. The Council's Economic Regeneration Service recommends heads of terms to promote employment of local residents at the end user phase. These heads of terms have been attached as requested. The proposal will have a beneficial impact on local employment and is supported. Turning now to the design and the impact on local heritage, the proposal is for change of use and proposes no further external changes than those previously approved under previous applications. The applicant has confirmed that these changes have been implemented. Warehouse K is a Grade 2 listed building and affects the setting of a Grade 2 listed building known as Warehouse W. By reason of the minor works associated with the proposal, listed building consent is not required here. By reason of the very minor works that the proposal brings forward, the proposal does not impact on the character or appearance of the host listed building, nor nearby listed buildings. The proposal therefore has an acceptable impact on the historic environment. As part of the assessment of the application, the London Borough of Newham's design team were consulted and they support the proposal. The design of the development and its impact on heritage is therefore considered acceptable. Turning now to the impact on neighbouring amenities, the proposal is for change of use and as such no additional impact in terms of loss of outlook, overbearing impact, loss of privacy and loss of daylight and sunlight is anticipated. Officers acknowledge that there will be increased comings and goings to the site, but this is not considered to be unacceptable in this employment hub setting. The hours of opening for customers is considered appropriate. As such, the impact of the proposal on neighbouring amenities is acceptable. In regards to transportation and travel, the application site has a PTEL of 2 to 3, which is due to increase to 4 with the delivery of the new Elizabeth line. The proposal is car-free to ensure staff fully utilise sustainable methods of transport. This is secured via Section 106. A travel plan is secured via condition in Section 106 to further ensure sustainable transportation objectives are met. Transportation officers note that the proposal is unlikely to have any changes in delivery and servicing. However, details have been secured via planning condition to ensure these meet council approval. A cycle parking condition has been attached to ensure London Plan compliant level of secure and accessible cycle parking is delivered. The proposal complies with sustainable transportation objectives and is supported. Other key material considerations relate to energy sustainability and habitat regulation assessment. The proposed development with respect to these above matters is supported as detailed on pages 207 to 208 of the committee report and also within the officer's update. The Strategic Development Committee is asked to resolve to agree the reasons for approval as set out in the officer's report and to delegate authority to the Director of Planning and Development to grant planning permission subject to the completion of a legal agreement under Section 106 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990 as amended, based on the heads of terms identified as Appendix 2 of the report and the conditions listed in Appendix 1 of the report. That concludes my presentation. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Members, could I ask please if you have questions relating to this application? Rohit, and then I saw Councillor Griffiths. Then I'll move to this side of the room.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very familiar with the site. It's in my ward. I have two questions. One is for the applicant and one is more for the officer. So I'm very pleased to know that the site will not be used for immigration control, but for a passport, as a passport office only. Can I just ask, anecdotally, one does hear of people going to the passport office and being detained. So you know that none of that will be taking place, or there isn't that facility within this space. So that was my first question. And my second question was, it says in the papers that it's estimated that there will be approximately 180 trips per hour, and plus you've got 500 employees. So roughly, I'm presuming that's around 1,500 people per day. So do we have the transport infrastructure? And I should say, I'm pleased again, it's a car-free development, but do we have the transport infrastructure? What's being done to kind of make sure that the pressure is not there?
Thank you. Could I direct the first part of that question perhaps back to Harriet around the conditions that I know you've been working with the Passport Office to obtain?
Certainly. Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Councillor, for your question. In regards to the use of the site, the applicant has assured us that the Passport Office is just purely for the issuing of passports to UK citizens, and as such, there is no role that they take in regards to assessing whether a person qualifies for a UK passport in terms of their citizenship, nor does it involve anything to do with immigration control or detention. Now, to ensure that the site is used just purely for a passport office and does not involve any detention or immigration control, a condition has been attached which limits the use. Any further changes in that use would require planning permission from the council and a planning assessment.
Thank you. And for members, that's on page 211, condition number 8, really explicit on that point, which I think is very reassuring. The second part of Councillor Dasgupta's question was about the transport infrastructure.
Certainly. Thank you very much for that question, Councillor. I will start off with answering the question, but I'll also ask my colleague Ian Pinamont-Hyde, who is our Transportation Officer, whether he'd like to make any further comment. Councillor, your question was regarding the number of trips and whether there was enough transport, public transport, to support that. Our view is that there is. We're aware that the site has a good PTAL rating, and that is due to increase with the delivery of the Elizabeth line, which with the current estimations is due to come forward in 2022. We have secured a travel plan to ensure that the best use of sustainable transportation methods is secured. Ian, would you be able to provide some further comments in terms of your transportation assessment?
Yes, of course, Harriet. Just to say, really, just to reiterate, and agree with the point you've already made, and with respect to the numbers, obviously, fingers crossed, all going well, we should have Crossrail up and running. And in terms, whilst the numbers sound quite large, when you actually consider them in the context of the capacity that's available or will be available, they're not considered to be problematical at all. I mean, the vast majority of customers are going to be arriving outside of the peaks as well, so we don't anticipate any particular issues with this at all.
One further point I might add is also, as the applicant has spent in the presentation and according to the information they presented towards the council, is that there is a long-term strategy for digitisation of the Passport Office services, which will mean there will be a decrease over time in the number of visitors to the site, and therefore less reliance on public transport. But as Ian has said, we feel that we're confident that there's sufficient public transport accessibility to support the numbers, the peak numbers that they are anticipating to have.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Councillor Griffiths.
Yes, I was a bit confused about the statement that the building's had a big refurb and not been building work. Presumably there's for computers and interview rooms and all that kind of stuff. Does that come back later, or I was a bit confused about it?
I'm so sorry, Councillor. Do you mind just repeating that question? I just couldn't quite catch all of it.
Perhaps you could speak up a bit so the microphone can catch you.
I don't often get asked to speak up. Sorry, I was a bit confused by the statement that there was building work affecting the Grade 2 listed status, and the applicant's statement that it's had a major refurb. Presumably, there's some work that needs doing to supply interview rooms and kit out for information technology and all those kind of things.
Thank you very much for your question, Councillor. So in terms of the impact on the listed building, that would be primarily caused through external changes, and there are no external changes taking place as part of this application. We have been liaising with the applicant to understand better the level of fit out that would be required as part of these works. We understand already some of that fit out has taken place. These are considered to be very minor, and both would not warrant the securing of construction jobs through employment just by reason of how minor those works are, but also means that they don't impact on the historic listing of the building, they wouldn't have any impact on the character appearance of the listed building and wouldn't compromise it.
Thank you. Councillor Lee Parkway.
Thank you. Just looking at the page 205, talking about car parking, and this is going to be a car-free approach. And there's no proposed car parking for staff or customers associated with this proposed development. I just want to ask, is that realistic in relation to Blue Badge and those that may be your staff that may have a disability like a wheelchair? How will they be getting to this place of work? And also the customers that will be coming to use the facility, how would they also, if they're a wheelchair user, how would they actually be getting there? Because it sounds to me that as much as my colleagues may agree with free parking, for those some people it is required.
Thank you very much for your question, Councillor. I'd like to draw your attention to the officer's update. We have added a head of term securing the delivery of Blue Badge parking. We are undergoing ongoing discussion to maximise the amount of Blue Badge parking that can be accommodated within the site boundary. So this is something that we will continue to work with the applicant, and that will be secured via section 106, head of term.
Thank you. Can I just come back on that? Is that, oh, yeah, someone else was going to say something.
Sorry, was there someone on Zoom who wanted to come in on that as well? No, Colleen, bring you back in.
So just in regards to that being, I'm assuming you're referring to item 8 on where it talks about transport, delivery of Blue Badge parking bays, but it doesn't say amount. So that could be 1. Or that could be 25.
Yes, the actual number will be secured via the section 106.
Right.
We're in the process of working with the applicant to map out and decide the maximum number that can be delivered on the site.
Thank you.
Thank you. Were there further questions, please? Councillor Garfield.
Just a quick one, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, but the applicants are new. So 48 proposed cycle parking spaces for a staff of several hundred and 180 trips an hour seems to me like rather low, given that if we assume we're looking to achieve between 10 and 20% of journeys with the PTAR rating this high and in an area that is designated, I believe, an area of opportunity by the GLA, we would want that to be the level of journeys travelled by bike. This, to me, doesn't appear to facilitate that provision. So, should more people than expected travel to the site by bike, is there future plans or is there a future condition that can be put forward to the applicant so that additional spaces can be designed and added as further down the line?
Thank you very much for your question, Councillor. We do have a condition on attached to this, which is for cycle parking, which requires the full details to be submitted to the local planning authority for review. That is because the initial number of cycle parking spaces that was proposed was not considered to be high enough. The applicant has come back to us and has very positively liaised with the council to maximise the amount of cycle parking on site. But this is part of an ongoing discussion, and the final details will be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority in consultation with our transportation team. This is in order for the proposal to deliver London Plan compliant level cycle parking, which meets all the standards, both in terms of numbers, but also in terms of quality.
Might I be so bold as to suggest that we'd like to exceed those standards as opposed to simply meet them?
Oh, I see. So we obviously will be always look to maximise cycle parking. This is something we're happy to continue to liaise with the applicant with. We're aware that the important sustainable transportation measures, and the applicant, as I said, has been very positive in working proactively with the council. I'm sure this is something that they will be happy to kind of look into further and accommodate where possible.
Thank you, Harriet. And likewise, Chair, if I may, I can see a hand, and I'm going to obviously answer the question that you're about to answer, I'm sure. Have we mapped out the routes to Warehouse Quay from what we would imagine to be the majority of customers making certain journeys, from the north, across from Tower Hamlets, and then from Beckton too, to ensure that those routes are safe? And if they're not currently safe, are we getting plans together so that those 20% of journeys that can be made by bike to Warehouse Quay with the provision that Harriet lays out, which exceeds the standards of future, can be done so safely?
I was just going to the quantum of cycle parking. The applicants increased it now to 59,
Yes.
which is a equivalent sort of mode share, if you like, of about 12%. We've also got a travel plan, so that will have a life of a minimum of 5 years. And within the travel plan, there'll be like a biannual survey of mode, and there'll also be assessment and monitoring of the use of the cycle parking. So within the travel plan, there'll be the ability to then increase the amount of cycle parking within the demise of the site. We're not clear on the exact number of parking bays that this Warehouse K actually leases or owns, then that's one of the other issues which is going to contribute towards working out how we're going to get blue badge parking. But I suspect there'll be the option, there will be space to increase the cycle parking beyond what's already being proposed, and that's something that can be actively monitored and managed via the travel plan.
Thank you.
The second part of your question, the Seagull Lane itself, the cycle parking is located in the basement, so it's facing Seagull Lane. I'm assuming most members are aware that obviously with the Western Gateway development, there's going to be some changes made to Seagull Lane. The environment along Seagull Lane is going to improve. I mean, it is essentially a service road, but it will improve. It's been reduced to a single lane in each direction. There's going to be landscaping and things like that. So the ambience and feel of that will certainly improve. With regards to the wider routes, I mean, that's really beyond the context of what could be realistically be expected to be delivered from this application. But as you're all very, very aware, all our sort of highways and sustainable transport teams are very much focused on, collectively improving things across boroughs and connecting between boroughs. So, the only way things are going to go is to improve in the longer term. I hope that helps.
Perhaps we could add to the note that we made earlier to encourage our highways colleagues to think about those broader strategic routes. James, did I see your hand as well?
Yeah, Chair, thank you. First question is around security. This is a government building, and I know it's within Excel. It's a Grade 2 listed building, and I imagine that some security works, CCTV cameras and other facilities might need to take place. And it's just that I'm not sure it is building by design, but make sure that the Metropolitan Police and local authorities and everyone else knows that we're making these adjustments, and this is not going to be a target with City Hall down the road as well. In our area. And two, on the jobs, is there a credible jobs plan attached to this development? I think we always talk, or developers always talk about jobs coming to the area. However, whether they materialise or not, I'm not sure. Can we monitor this and ensure that 35%, 50% of jobs that are created from this actually go to local people?
Thank you very much for your questions, Councillor. So, addressing the matter relating to security, I'd like to draw your attention to the officer's update. After the committee report was published, the Metropolitan Police Service did get in contact with the council with their consultation response. They had met with the applicant to discuss the proposal, and they were satisfied with the security arrangements for the site. So they have not recommended any secure by design conditions because they're satisfied that the application site meets their security requirements. So that it was a useful piece of correspondence for us to receive. In regards to the matters relating to jobs, yes, it is a priority for us to secure local employment. As expressed, because there's no construction phase, we are not securing any construction phase heads of terms, but you will see in the heads of terms list on pages 173 of the committee and 174 of the committee report that we are looking to secure 50% of end user phase to be Newham residents. This will be part of an ongoing plan strategy, and the applicant will be working with Newham's workplaces teams to, with the drafting of the Section 106, to ensure the right mechanisms are put in place to promote the site for local employment, as this does have a high number of employees and as a national government function, and would really benefit the vitality and viability of the area and provide great opportunities for the people of Newham.
Thank you. If colleagues are in agreement, I'd like to suggest that we move this item to the vote. Could I ask that you put the recommendation up on screen for our reference, please?
Certainly, Chair, just doing that now.
Thank you. We can see that. So as you can see, the Strategic Development Committee is asked to resolve the following, which includes approving the application. Can I ask, please, all of those in favour show their hands? Thank you. That is unanimous, and that concludes that item on the agenda. The next item on our agenda would have been item 8, which we've already agreed to defer. We therefore move on to item 9. I'd like to suggest that we use a provision in how we operate these meetings that we haven't used before, which is that where an application is straightforward and is in very straightforward cases where the recommendation is to approve, the committee sometimes makes a decision based solely on the officer's report without an officer presentation or extensive debate. If members are in agreement, I'd like to propose with this application, which doesn't propose any changes to an existing permission apart from increasing the proportion of affordable homes, obviously a really important part of our planning policy. I would like to suggest that we move straight to the vote on that item. Are committee members agreeable to that?
Yes.
Thank you. In which case, I wonder if I could please ask officer who was going to present, perhaps that's you, Claire, are you able to share your screen, please, and put the recommendation up for us? It is quite unusual for us to move straight to the vote on an item, but on reflection, given the nature of it, the nature of the meeting, I think it is appropriate in these particular circumstances. Thank you. So the officer recommendation here is that we are asked to note the committee update and resolve to, again, I won't read it out, but the resolutions above, including the reasons for approval. Before I do so, I trust everybody has read the officer report in the agenda. That's great. Thank you. Can I ask, please, that those in favour of the recommendation from officers raise their hands, please? Thank you. That is again unanimous, and that is perhaps the speediest dealing with an agenda item that we've done. That then brings us on to agenda item number 10, developer contributions. I think we've still got Claire's screen being shared at the moment. If it's possible, Claire, to stop sharing. Thank you. And thank you for your patience, Claire. I'm sorry that you were left hanging for so long, but I hope you understand.
No problem. Thank you.
Item 10 on the agenda then. Jennifer, did you want to come in and introduce this item, or was a member of your team going to start off?
Apologies, it's been a while since I've used Zoom and we fast forwarded through that last item. So we do have a presentation, Chair, if that's okay for us to share screen.
That's absolutely fine. I'd just say that given the volume of business we've had tonight, again, if you could really stick to the key points, that would be very much appreciated. Thank you.
Very much welcome that as well. Bear with. So whilst my screen is loading up and hopefully you can start to see this, my name is Jennifer Bishop. I'm the infrastructure planning manager who deals with section 106 and SIL. My colleague Claire Sykes was actually the author of this of the report to members. Unfortunately, she's unwell, so I'll be presenting this alongside my colleague Duncan Ailes, who is the council's new principal aviation officer. Recognising the context and that members have already read this, I won't do an overview of what developer contributions are, but just as a shorthand, developer contributions capture both section 106 planning obligations, which you'll have seen lots of heads of terms in the reports that we've just been hearing and members have just been determining, and the SIL is the other regime, which is effectively a tax on development that's non-negotiable. Our statutory report is set out in Appendix 1 to members of the Strategic Development Committee report, and then we have an obligation in the Airport Section 106 agreement to also look and report back to members on their performance against their annual performance report, and Duncan will take that element forward. So just to jump into the SIL matters, so this report, this section of the report just takes an extract from table 1 of our substantive report rather than the appendix. So it's detailed in section 3, summarises the monies that we've received and expended in the reported year and the monies that we've carried forward. I'll focus a little bit on neighbourhood SIL in a moment, but just as a sort of to draw your attention, despite being quite an extraordinary year in the 2020-21 financial year. Oh no, it's the year before. Yeah, 2020-21, apologies. Yeah, it was extraordinary, and clearly I've blocked it out, apologies. Lots of development was still happening in the borough despite the pandemic and things appearing to grind to a halt. Lots of development was still ongoing, and so lots of money was triggered to be paid via the CIL regime. So £5.5 million was received by the council. We spent around £3 million, and a section of the report details, a section of the appendix details what we spent those monies on. We spent some money on some administrative costs so that we can keep collecting those monies in future years, and then as a reference, I will talk about neighbourhood CIL. In relation to one of the things that's one of the most time-consuming processes that the collecting authority undertake on behalf of the council, we process a lot of claims for relief or exemption. So the previous items have made reference to the delivery of affordable housing, which is obviously fantastic. It does then trigger an ability for a developer to claim relief from paying monies to the council by the CIL regime, because it's considered that the affordable housing itself is considered a form of benefit. So we had 22 claims for relief last year, totaling £8.45 million, which therefore isn't payable to the council because affordable housing is being delivered instead. Just as a sort of to come back to partly Councillor Garfield's question earlier to two of the items in relation to how we spend our CIL monies and what the wider what our wider priorities are for investment in CIL. So we have an infrastructure list which was approved by Cabinet last December, which sets out the types of things that we may fund through CIL, either fully or in part. So the provision, improvement, operation and maintenance of a range of types of infrastructure. When this list was first approved, and this is the first one since our CIL was introduced in 2014, we made sure that the administration's priorities in relation to the COVID-19 recovery and reorientation strategy, the 50 steps towards a healthy NUM, and other things that were important to us last year were captured in the sorts of things that we may choose to spend our CIL on in the current financial year and in the previous financial year. Neighbourhood CIL is something that is a real benefit, and the current administration has made leaps to enable and ensure that our residents are able to engage through the neighbourhood CIL process and actually co-create and deliver projects either themselves or at the very least vote on projects that are happening in their area that will be delivered by various community groups, the voluntary community and faith sector, and resident groups themselves. So this slide sets out a little bit of information as to the processes that we've gone through. The substantive delivery of projects, the 100k for each of the community neighbourhoods, is happening in the current financial year, so it isn't part of our report. There was an interim report to Cabinet last month, I think it was October, so there is some information in the public domain about things that have been happening though. In relation to Section 106 monies, members continued at a pace, that is officers that are also on this call, to continue to secure a heck of a lot of monies and on-site provisions and wider community benefits. So looking singularly at the money, during the last financial year, 47 deeds were completed, securing £11 million worth of monies. So I've made reference there, this is an adaptation to the table that's in the report. So there were 8 deeds of modification, similarly to Claire's item that's just gone through. That would be triggered. That would be considered to be a modification rather than a new load of provisions. We also had 16 unilateral undertakings. Typically, we use those where the council is the applicant. So it just also demonstrates the level of affordable housing and other affordable homes for NUM and other programmes that are being delivered by the council in the last year that triggered Section 106 agreements. We've had 49 different planning permissions make payments to us in the last year, totaling £7.7 million. We spent £8.8 million, but I think the key thing for all of us to take away is the allocation of £42 million in the last financial year, which is absolutely phenomenal. Although it's towards 13 projects, the two biggies I've outlined on the slide. There are £32 million towards the Affordable Homes for Newham programme to be delivered across a number of years. That in itself was the single biggest allocation of Section 106 monies that we've ever undertaken, and that was approved by Cabinet towards the end of the last financial year, with delivery now happening at a pace. And there's £7 million towards it says work placement, but that should be our new and work effectively, for 3 years worth of funding into their coffers. I'll hand over to Duncan.
Thanks, Jennifer. And I will try and keep this fairly brief as requested. So the annual performance report is a requirement of the 2016 CADPA permission, and essentially every year the airport have to issue a report which covers the previous calendar year, so slightly different from the last report, which was talking about financial years. So this report covers the 2020 calendar year, and the council, we're not able to approve or reject the APR, but we can provide comments to the airport. Can I get the next slide, please, Jennifer? So just to give a sort of quick background to the 2020 airport operations, obviously this was a really unique year for the airport and aviation in general. So between January and March, it was more or less operating as normal. And then it shut down from March to July, obviously due to the COVID pandemic and impact on passenger numbers, and there just wasn't the demand necessary for them to continue operating. And then the airport reopened in July, but clearly there were sort of extensive restrictions around COVID and quarantine that had a significant impact on passenger numbers. So overall, there was an 82% reduction in passenger numbers and a 77% reduction in air traffic movements. In terms of the construction of the CADPA scheme, so we're talking about the parallel taxiway, the new stands, and then the digital air traffic control tower. That work continued until October, when they decided to sort of pause the second phase of the development due to the impact on aviation and obviously the airport's sort of finances, and they've said that they're intending to recommence that work when the passenger numbers recover and it's clearer what future demand there will be. Just quickly on the digital air traffic control tower, that is quite an interesting sort of element that they've delivered. And it's the first digital air traffic control tower in the country. I think there have been some smaller ones in Scandinavia, but that's quite a sort of innovative development. Could I get the next slide, please? So in terms of employment, obviously this has been a significant issue that members have raised at previous committee meetings. Despite the use of the government's furlough scheme, there was quite a significant reduction in employment on the site by the airport and other on-site employers, so concessions. And that led to a 27% reduction in employment on the site in December 2020 compared to 2019. Under the Section 106 agreement, there is a requirement to use reasonable endeavours to meet some specified targets for recruiting staff both in Newham and the local area, which is a sort of series of boroughs which is defined in Section 106. And in the next slide, going to have the tables where we report their compliance. So I mean, clearly looking at the Section 106 target in the first column of the first table, and then the result in 2020, there's a failure to comply in terms of achieving the number. I think there's some sort of mitigating factors in terms of clearly COVID had a massive impact on the aviation sector, and these percentage figures, they really report January to March, sort of before the shutdown, because from March there was a freeze in recruitment. And our sort of conclusion is that given the work that the airport do with our Newham work, and the actual wording in the Section 106, which is to use reasonable endeavours, we do think that it's hard to say that they're not complying with the 106, albeit clearly we need to carry on working to try and increase the numbers where we can. And then the final table just shows the recruitment for construction roles in 2020, which is clearly an even lower result. And I think that one partly reflects, I suppose, the speciality of some of the work that was being done in terms of things like the piling works for the dock, to do the parallel taxiway, and clearly it's been difficult for them to recruit locally for that. Could I get the next slide, please? So in terms of noise and air quality, the airport have reported themselves in compliance with all the various planning conditions and obligations. I mean, clearly there was a massive reduction in flight numbers, which significantly reduced the noise and air quality impact. They continue to operate their sound insulation scheme. So 151 properties were treated for sound insulation despite the noise content not having increased. And then we've got a section in the report which is sort of updating members on the position with some GLA properties and Royal Docks, where previously there's been a sort of barrier in delivering sound insulation, but the airport have sort of come up with a way forward which they think can unblock the issue. Could I get the next slide, please? And then, this final slide shows the financial contributions that were made by the airport. There were also payments for education employment contributions, and the council did accept an application to defer those payments in view of the the impact of COVID on the aviation sector and the airport specifically. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. We are asked to note the information relating to developer contributions and on London City Airport compliance and the other information. Are there any questions from members, please? Councillor Skinverdi.
One question on the last slide. Payment to TfL for management of the stations. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I understand that payment was made in, I think it was January or February 2020. There has been an application in this year, 2021, to defer the DLR payment. But since this report is talking about the calendar year 2020, that payment was made in terms of the period we're looking at.
So are we saying this is a payment to TfL for the management staff at the stations within London or New?
Yeah, I understand that the money goes toward having additional station staff on the DLR station. I wonder if you could add a bit more detail, Jennifer.
Yeah, so Councillor, it's in relation to our anticipation that the growth at the airport was going to be quite significant. There were going to be lots of passengers actually on the London City Airport DLR station platform, and the anticipation was that lots of people would go up the escalators and just stand there, and people wouldn't be able to get onto the DLR quickly enough. So the airport agreed during the process of us assessing the application that they would pay for a member of staff effectively to shoo people along the platform and make sure we use the full length of the platform to make sure that we could get enough passengers onto every open door and get those DLRs off quickly and efficiently. In real terms, the DLR are content that they're not going to be actually spending that money yet. It is ring fenced for that use. So as and when the airport growth comes back to a point that it necessitates that, then TfL or the DLR station staff will actually be put into post.
Thank you. Does that address your query? Thank you. Councillor Beckles.
Just a question around the repayment of money to the repayment of money to developers. It was 22 developers or 22 successful appeals, 8 point something million. Can that be addressed through our local plan? I'm sure the answer is going to be no. It's probably statutory. Is that something that we can address through our local plan, that just because you contribute affordable housing and you contribute Section 106, it's, the two aren't somewhat intertwined? Affordable housing is to house people who need to live somewhere affordably, and the Section 106 money is to address, say, infrastructure concerns and build and for community benefit rather than repaying them back. Is that something we can voice in our local plan?
I'm not sure. So we've not paid any monies back to any developers. So apologies if I've missold some information in one of my slides. So we haven't made any money at all back to developers. We've had lots of income and lots of expenditure over the reported year. In terms of the way our Section 106 agreements are structured, and if Amanda wants to jump in, she's very welcome to. We are really quite robust in making sure that we try to make sure that developers can't get their money back, that we take the money in, we've got a governance process to make sure the monies are allocated towards projects, and then we push different parts of the organisation to spend those monies. In relation to affordable housing, it is in exceptional circumstances that we take off-site payments. Members will know themselves that you're pushing for more and more on-site, and James and his team work really hard to make sure that where viability can improve, we also have review mechanisms, but we do try to get on-site early payment. Some of those monies that we do accrue towards affordable housing have actually been because of review mechanisms. So where viability has improved and we haven't been able to get it on site, we've taken a cash payment off-site for ourselves to deliver. Although that does shift the burden to us, so it isn't optimal, and we would prefer to have on-site affordable housing to enable those mixed and balanced communities to come forward.
Thank you. I have very helpfully, Jennifer has met with me a couple of times in my position as chair to talk about this issue so I can understand it a bit better. And one of the things that I was really really pleased to know about was where that kind of review mechanism is working, because obviously we see those conditions in the abstract and in theory, where we've written down if the viability improves, then we can claw back some cash payments. And I'm really keen to get some examples of where that has worked to us, so we can see how that works. The other thing that Jennifer and I have been discussing, which I know she is very keen on, and I'm sure members will be as well, is about this report is a statutory one, which is in the format that's statutorily required. And what we want to do is, and what Jennifer's very keen on, is to make the process of how these monies are spent locally much more transparent, so that that's much more obvious to people. I know we discussed that in our briefing, but I thought it was worth saying in public session as well. Were there any further questions on this report, please? In which case, I'd like to ask that we agree to note it as is suggested. Thank you very much for that. Thank you so much for your time and your continued energy and attention this evening. Sincere thanks to officers as well for all the work that you've put in tonight. It's very much appreciated. Thank you to those who've attended, who are obviously not here at the moment, and I'll draw this meeting to a close.
Chair, if I may, could I just, through yourself, if that's okay, could I just highlight that it's Harriet Peaty's last committee. Harriet has been a valued member of the planning team for some time now, and I just want to, for the minutes, thank her for her contributions very much so over the years, and she's going to go on and do wonderful things, and we're going to miss her.
We are indeed. Express our thanks and appreciation from the members as well. The work of planning officers and the work that you've done, Harriet, is something that we never take for granted, and we're very grateful and wish you all the best.
Harriet, where are you going?
I'm going to Islington Council. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, James, and thank you very much, members. It's been my pleasure to work for the London Borough of Newham.
Pleasure. Thank you, Harriet.
Thank you.
Best of luck.
Thank you very much.
If you don't like it, you can always come back.
That's a